What's a mook?
A mook? What's a mook?
You can't call me a mook.
I can't?
No.
I give you mook. Hey, it's a mook.
Greetings from the Movies with Mooks podcast.
Yes. Well, that was just us bringing you into the Halloween vibes, because we're doing another Halloween episode of Movies with the Mooks.
As we keep getting closer to Halloween time, man, we're just getting more and more in the festive spirits.
We are indeed. I think that's what we're doing. We are getting more festive. We've got our candles here going again. We got smoke. Oliver brought out the smoke machine.
You can hear it if you listen carefully. You can hear the fog. See? Yeah, there it is.
Oh yeah. Totally heard it.
But yeah, I imagine how horrifying it's going to be when we do our last show of the month, when we're the closest to Halloween. I mean, how intense is that going to end up being?
Well, we're going to have to keep on upping the ante. But, so I don't know. We'll have to come up with some creative ideas.
We'll do our last show in a cemetery.
Oh,
live.
That's not a bad idea.
Yeah, it's actually not. I was kind of joking, but as I kind of said it, I'm like, you know what? That's not the craziest thing for us to do on Halloween.
Not the craziest thing we've ever done.
No.
Maybe we could do it in coffins. We could, I don't know. That's going too far. But let's talk about the episode that we're going to do today. So yesterday, we actually recorded an episode on animated films. Today, we're going to talk about family-friendly, kid-friendly films, live-action genre. Mm-hmm. And our next episode, a little sneak preview. Should we talk about it? Should we mention it?
Yeah, why not? I guess we could give a...
Yeah, sure.
Should we?
This is a little preview of just so you know what to expect. We did the animated films. We're doing kind of family-friendly kid films today. And next episode, we're going to do horror comedy. So we're kind of doing all these lighthearted, lighter-hearted.
Well, it's just there's so much of it, you know.
I know. We decided to split it up in 3 episodes, and we're going to try and keep these a little bit shorter than our first 3, because we found those were going on quite a long time.
And then after the horror comedy one, you know, we'll come back in form and we'll do some really horrible, disturbing theme. After that, yeah. I'm sure to make up for these lighthearted ones. But
we'll save the torture porn for that.
There you go. Yeah, yeah.
Time. But let's get into talking about the family friendly, because I actually really like family friendly kind of wholesome horror comedy.
Well, it's the stuff that got us all into it to begin with, right?
Well, that's just it.
It's like a drug. It's the first taste.
Exactly. Yeah, that's what I get really nostalgic about. And what's cool about it to me is, like, when I look back at some of these things, is it's like they were scary when I was growing up with them, and like just creepy, spooky, but they weren't like totally traumatizing or anything. You just it kind of gives you like a warm, fuzzy feeling of like, just being a little bit spooked as a kid. And I love stuff like that. Yeah,
no, I mean, it's funny, like now, like there's almost nothing that scares me. But when I was a kid, some of these really innocent movies really did freak me out. Mm-hmm. And I don't know, maybe that's where the fascination came from, was I was just, you traumatized me. What is this thing that traumatized me, and how do I overcome it?
Yeah. What I do find interesting is how sometimes the more suggestive stuff actually is more scary than the stuff that's blatantly right in your face. Like, you can be watching somebody having their limbs hacked off, but I don't know that it's as scary as, say, for instance, some of the stuff that was coming up in... I was watching The Witches the other night for the first time. Actually, I hadn't seen The Witches.
Yeah,
but that's a Jim Henson produced film, and it's based on a Roald Dahl novel. And what I found was the early part of the movie is actually really quite creepy and disturbing. Like, she's talking. It starts with the boy. His grandmother is telling him all about witches and how they hate nasty little children, and how these kids would just be like disappearing and that sort of thing. And not knowing what happens to these kids is actually like, it's just these abducted kids who go missing, and these witches are out there like doing horrible things to them. It's this freaky idea, and you don't have to show it. You just have to like talk about it, and it's quite disturbing, honestly. It's even as a, what am I, even in my 30s now, it's like, that was the stuff I was like, ooh, this is good, but it's good because it's dark and it's evil.
So, I mean, Kevin already knows this, but I guess I'll tell the listeners, just the interesting thing about The Witches is it's the first movie I ever saw in theaters. So I always will hold it closely for that. And I remember like pretty well watching it and remembering that beginning of the movie and realizing, yeah, that's the scariest part of the whole movie is that early story that the grandmother's telling the boy about her friend who gets abducted by a witch and then is, basically kind of trapped in this family painting of theirs. And it's almost like a segment from another movie. You're almost seeing a different movie for it. It's very just like mature and it's just really creepy. It's the thing that kind of always has stuck with me with that movie. I kind of almost wish the movie had more of that kind of tone.
Well, that was what I was really hoping they were going to continue on with is that type of thing. And it's funny too, because like the idea of a person being trapped in a painting, it's not nearly as gruesome as, someone like, I don't know, being tortured to death or like, as I say, having their limbs hacked off or whatever. But there's something just unsettling and disturbing about it. Like this idea that the person is trapped, that you can't reach them, and you don't really know what they're experiencing.
Well, yeah, that's the thing is like, can they see you when they're peering up from the painting? Do they see you, or are they just trapped in this weird farmhouse world inside of a paint? And what was creepy was they talked about how over the years they would see her aging, and then one day she just disappears, and you're like, so she died, or that's what would have happened when she had died, And I've always kind of wondered. I've never read the Roald Dahl book, but I was like, I wonder, like, is that element in the story itself, or was that like an add-on, because it probably wasn't the longest book, so you could sometimes with these adaptations they'll extend things to make it a full feature-length story. But if that's an element of the story itself, then kudos to Roald Dahl, because that's a really creepy little element in the story. Yeah,
and it's imaginative, and as I say, like, it's not something that's obviously horrific, but it is the way that it's presented.
Yeah.
You know? And I find that a lot of this kind of family-friendly stuff tends to do stuff like that, where it's more suggestive as opposed to being graphic. But in many ways, as I say, I do find the suggestive stuff can be more disturbing and more haunting than the graphic stuff.
Well, and the irony is that they probably thought that they were doing the kids a favor. In general, when these sort of movies make things sort of ambiguous, they probably think, oh, well, we're preventing a kid from being traumatized. But it's like, well, no, maybe what you did was you actually made something far more effective and creepy.
Yeah.
As opposed to if you showed a cheesy effect or something.
That's just it. I think that's the interesting thing about it.
We were also, I think, talking briefly either earlier today or last night about the impressive effects from The Witches, just the practical effects of the Jim Henson Studios, of the the mice characters and the transformation sequences.
Yeah, I thought that was amazing. Like when you see that British boy get transformed, and obviously they do it in stages and they cut away and stuff. But again, really disturbing. The way they show it, it's like it. And they do it in like this series of fairly fast cuts and flashes, but you get the impression that he's enduring this like torturous.
It seems very painful. It's like a werewolf transformation, but into a mouse.
Yeah. It is a pretty horrifying sequence. And the thing that, again, the movie doesn't. I think it's just worth noting right now as the movie progresses, it doesn't live up to the initial creepiness that it's building up to be. And that's what's quite disappointing about it. Like, as a result, I don't love the movie, but I thought the way that it starts very strong, and it inspires me to want to like make something that that would kind of carry on what it started, But obviously after the kid gets transformed, it's like the transformation scene is really disturbing, but then later on he's just like acting all normal, that he's a mouse, and doesn't seem to be affected by it at all, which I think is a huge mistake.
Well, it's kind of funny because it's really a children's film, but once the two main boys, who are really the only children in the movie, once they become mice, there's really no children in the film. it's really an adult. It's a movie filled of adult characters and a few animatronic mice.
Yeah.
But for a children's movie, there's almost really no children in the whole movie.
Yeah, true.
But I thought it was for a movie. You know, there's so many movies that have delved on the subject of witches, and I did like the Roald Dahl take, where it's a very original take on witches. I like they kind of created a lot of the lore where, you know, like they're all bald and they're all these bald women with itchy scalps and they have to wear wigs.
That was great. Again, I found that very disturbing when you're just kind of seeing glimpses of it, and they're like scratching they're still wearing their wigs, but she's like scratching her head, and you can see like these scabs underneath there, and you're like, oh, and that's hideous.
It's almost like they're like allergic to children, or they're just so disgusted. Like they describe about how, you know, children just smell like dog droppings, and that's why that's why they want to eliminate all the kids, because their skin crawls just when they're ever near a child.
Yeah.
And so and watching this movie as a young kid, it had that much more of an impact, because it was almost like a very anti-kid movie. You're watching these characters who want to just take out, well, essentially you're taking out the human race, right? Because if you obliterate all the children, well, what do you have left?
Yeah.
And
that's one of the things I really liked about, again, the beginning, is just that she's talking about like how witches hate children and do evil things to them and stuff.
Yeah.
It just sets up this danger and a situation where children aren't just like cute, beloved characters or whatever. They're kind of these despised, loathed, and very vulnerable people who, you know, there's something disturbing about children and how innocent and vulnerable they are being abused and stuff like that by adults. Obviously, that's like something that's just disturbing in general, and that's why it's like a very considered an especially grim sort of crime to commit crimes against children, right?
Well, it's interesting that it was a Roald Dahl story, because there's been a lot of theories about whether Roald Dahl himself was a fan of children, because so many of his novels are about the sort of abuse and kind of hatred of children in many of his pieces.
Well, you think about that, like with Willy Wonka, for instance,
exactly,
right? And how Willy Wonka is kind of like he's looking for, you know, a good kid to come and take over his factory, but he doesn't seem to like a lot of them. You know, he thinks And he's not overly concerned, obviously, when like bad things are happening to them. And
I think that's very much somewhat of a staple of Roald Dahl himself, you know, in that I think Roald Dahl maybe had some kids himself. And so I don't think it's that he hated kids, but I think he was certainly not one to just throw a blanket statement of, oh, all kids are wonderful. I think he recognized the horrible side of what a lot of children can be, or like, you know, the spoiled child. And as well as appreciating what a good child could be. And
well, that's a good point, actually. And that's just it, is he does usually end up revealing goodness in children too, right? Like if it's, say, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, or in this movie, The Witches, it's like the kid, he's still kind of, it's like he makes that kid the protagonist of the story and has him succeed in the end. So it's obviously that he's not just getting off on bad things happening to kids, you know?
Well, essentially it's in his stories, it seems to be the pattern of, if you're a good child, you will be rewarded for it. Even though the boy becomes a mouse, you know, he does get changed back at the end. While if you're a bad child, not that the Rufus, who is the other child character, he's not a bad child, but he's a little bit of maybe a more spoiled child, which is why the reason he becomes a mouse is his own kind of greed for chocolate is what leads him to becoming a mouse. And that's, I think, again, a theme that, well, I mean, what's more relevant to Roald Dahl than the theme of a greedy child wanting some chocolate, right?
You know what is interesting is I feel like, it's not so much that these kids, how was I going to put this? It's like, okay, bad things happen to them, but it's kind of like they fall into a trap. They fall into a trap of their own weakness, right? So in the case of Augustus Gloop, like, you know, it's his gluttony that kind of gets him into his situation. In the case of Mike TV, it's his own obsession where he falls into the trap. In the case of Veruca Salt, or
Yeah, Veruca's, yeah.
Yeah,
with
yeah.
with the bad egg,
The golden
and the
eggs
goose,
and stuff. Yeah,
but
yeah,
these
yeah.
are, but they always do. They are set up into these traps, but the traps always do seem to be set up by adults. It's always an adult kind of.
It's set up by an adult, but it is also like the kid falls into it via their own weakness, right?
Yeah.
Their own kind of bad behavior is sort
Matilda
of
would.
what gives them
I don't know if you're how familiar you are with Matilda, but
Oh, yeah,
that
I
would be
watched that a
another
lot.
good example of kind of kids kind of being mistreated by the
Yeah.
elder adults.
And in that one, he doesn't really like antagonize the kids so much. Like the way, like some of the kids, especially in Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, I feel like they're a little bit antagonized. But in Matilda, it's kind of like they are more victims of this god-awful principle.
Also, James and the Giant Peach, I remembered James
I was
kind
going
of
to ask
being
if
ruled.
that was one of his novels.
It is a Roald Dahl story, and it's once he kind of gets into the Peach and has his own adventure, it's fine. But he is kind of living with essentially kind of like two wicked stepmothers who sort of
Yeah.
abuse him. And
So this is the other theme that I was going to get on with him is he seems to have a thing with nasty women. Right,
Roald Dahl does.
Like you got the witches, you've got the horrible teacher in Matilda, you've got
Right.
the crotchety ants in
Well, you gotta
abusive ants
maybe
in James and the Giant Peach.
maybe as a child he was himself abused by a bunch of like wicked matriarchal characters or something.
It might have been, right?
Yeah,
Like who
yeah.
knows? I'd be curious to find out, but it does seem to be like these sort of recurring themes.
Yeah.
But then there's also very nurturing women as well. Like, there's Miss Honey in Matilda, and she's like this very motherly sort of character.
Or the grandmother in The Witches
Yep,
is a positive character. So, and that's the thing is that it's, I don't get the sense that Roald Dahl has, I don't think he's like a misanthrope who hates people. I just think he's very aware of that, there's kind of, and especially if you're writing children's stories, I think it makes sense that, to have very kind of black and white, like these are the good characters, these are the bad characters. And I find in a lot of his stories, Roald Dahl's kind of very good at kind of making like, okay, like aside from Willy Wonka, who's kind of a gray character himself, but a lot of his stories, it's kind of like these are the good guys, these are the bad guys. And it's nice because he writes both good children and nasty children, and he writes good adults and nasty adults, and so they end up being most of the times sort of these morality tales.
Yeah, it does seem that way.
Should we move on to some other titles, or do you have was there anything else you wanted to say maybe about the Witches?
I was trying to think if there was anything more that I wanted to say about the Witches. I think the main point being kind of the trajectory that it takes, that it starts out on this really creepy note and then ends up getting a little too tame, I suppose.
Yeah, I would agree. We should let it be known to our listeners that we are talking about the original Witches from 1990. There was a remake with Anne Hathaway that came out a few years, but which neither of us have actually seen.
See, I haven't seen that, and I was telling my brother Jeffrey about having watched the original Witches, and he had seen the Anne Hathaway version, but only that version.
Interesting, yeah.
And
so
he was
together
saying-
you guys have seen it all.
Yeah. But he was saying, like, we were talking about some of the different parts in the movie, and he was like, oh, yeah, that was, a thing that I also didn't like about the Anne Hathaway movie. Like the fact that the kids are just too okay with being mice. It's like, this should be kind of a catastrophic thing for these kids to let the horror really sink in. But it comes off as very unconsequential. Like they're sort of just like, we're mice now.
And to be fair, you know what? That actually just might be sort of the way the story was written.
Well, and that's exactly what I was going to say is I think that's probably very true to the book.
Yeah.
Because, if it is consistent between the movies, it's probably true to the books. So.
If it wasn't written for kids, if it was written for adults, but was about a child becoming a mouse, it would probably be this much darker, realistic thing where the child's like, I will never be a child again. I'm a mouse permanently, grabbing its tail, trying to yank it off. Who knows?
Well, this is where I feel like some of these. I'm thinking of like, I don't know, would they be Goosebumps episodes or like Are You Afraid of the Dark and stuff like that, where I feel like there was things like kind of horrific things that would happen, sort of similar to like being trapped in a painting or being turned into a vegetable or whatever, where the consequences remain, they're irreversible. They don't just get transformed back or whatever. It's kind of like the creepiness of the tale is, and then he lived out the rest of his life as a squash because he'd been That might have been an episode of So Weird or something, actually.
I know what you mean when you say sort of like Goosebumps, and honestly, even some of the early Are You Afraid of the Darks? I remember some of the early seasons, some of them actually had some fairly like dark endings, and some of those early seasons, like there was even like, usually not the main character, but there'd be like sort of secondary characters who would like actually like die in early Afraid of the Dark episodes, and it slowly got a little bit more watered down because I think maybe kids started getting a little bit too scared of the show, maybe.
But that was what was good about those, and I feel like that's kind of the morality tale where it's like the consequences that occur are not just irreversible. Yeah. Like that's important. That's an important part of making it scary, but also in many ways making it a proper morality tale too. You even get that, I think, a bit in like grim fairy tales and stuff where bad things happen and like, sorry, they happened and you're fucked. Yeah. You don't just like get out of it by magic.
And the thing is, like, even though you're making something for kids, if it's still scary media for children, there still has to be some element that's actually frightening. You know, you don't want it to be so frightening that you've disturbed and scarred the kid for life, but there does have to be something that's scary. Otherwise, the kid's going to be like, well, why am I even watching this? I was looking for something scary. And so I guess there's like this really tough balance of like, how do you make something scary enough for a child without, you know, taking it over the line. I remember even there was a few, I think like, you know, there was a couple of Afraid of the Dark episodes that kind of really scared my sister because she was just a little bit too young at the time. And she'd grow older and she would laugh at the things that scared her, you know, but yeah, if you're a little bit just too young, the right idea can just kind of really freak you out. Yeah. Yeah. I remember there was this is not really like a Halloween theme, but there was an episode of a show. It was called Adventures in Odyssey. It's kind of like this, like, started as like this Christian themed sort of radio program, but they ended up making a bunch of short animated films. They'd be like a half hour or whatever. And there was this one about this cat burglar. It's like he goes and he dresses up. So there's like this main character who's kind of this sweet old man who is like an inventor and stuff. And this cat burglar like puts on a mask and breaks into people's houses and steals their jewelry and stuff. And at some point in the movie, like close to the end, kind of as the climax starts to happen, the main kid, he like finds himself cornered by this cat burglar, and he gets tied up by the guy. And, you know, this guy was like this, almost like a child predator in that he's this adult and he lures this kid back to his house and then like ties him up in his house and, you know, reveals who he is. Haha, I'm the cat burglar. And then he ties him up and like, you know, the kid Dylan finds out that he's been like wearing a mask of this sweet old man who's the inventor. And fuck, when I was a kid watching that, I would watch it with a lot of trepidation, you know, because I was just like, oh no, it's that scary cat burglar episode, like where Dylan gets essentially kidnapped. Man, I don't know. Certain things just kind of haunt you at a certain age. Yeah. Well, when you're so young, you have everything's being introduced to you for the first time, so you have so little to compare it to. You got such a low tolerance for scary things. Yeah. Because there's just nothing else like it. I remember I wasn't even planning on talking about this. Oh, sorry. Did you? Yeah. I was just gonna say that there were probably lots of more kind of gruesome things that didn't scare me, right? Mm-hmm. But for some reason, that video and that story was like frightening for me to watch. It was I'd watch it with trepidation, as I say. Whereas I would watch things like Willow, where you've got these scary skull mask kind of guy and this evil witch and stuff. I was just like into that. Mm-hmm. Wasn't scared by it at all. Now, did you see those around the same time? Yeah, I would have been around the same age. Oh, okay. Some of those things. So, yeah, no, it's interesting again how you can watch certain stuff, and even though it's kind of darker, maybe. Yeah, and it doesn't get you the way something else does. Yeah. Yeah, it's a cartoon versus a live action thing, too. Yeah. But sometimes it's just sometimes it's just, you know, maybe they had the music right, or there was just a certain amount of suspense. Like for whatever reason, yeah, they had the right technique to freak you out. Yeah, you know. Yeah. I remember I was freaked out by this. It was like a made-for-TV David Copperfield special, like the magician David Copperfield, and it was a whole theme based on like Phantom of the Opera, and most of David David Copperfield's specials were about him doing like magic tricks.
Yeah.
But I don't remember him doing a lot of magic tricks for this one. It was more like this weird, like, oh, I'm in France and I got to hunt down and find the Phantom. And there's just like certain parts where he would be like in this opera house and he'd be like in a little room that was like really dark and filled with just a whole bunch of sort of antiques. And you would just sort of see this little flashlight just sort of flashing its light in the room, and it like briefly like flashes over the face of the Phantom in his mask. And then it's like, oh wait, was that the Phantom? And he goes back and now the Phantom's gone. And I don't know what it was, but it really creeped me out as a kid. And
well,
I had
sometimes,
also,
yeah, that's a testament to like the filmmaking sometimes, hey?
Yeah, well, it's just, I think just sometimes you just see the right thing at the right time, where, again, I think for both of us, if we were maybe both just a year older when we had seen both of those things, maybe that would have just been enough of a difference for us not to have been scared at it. But all of a sudden you just occasionally watch the thing that you think you're old enough to handle until you realize, oh no, like maybe I was just a little bit too young, or I'm the perfect age, or I'm like the exact age that they wanted for the person to freak out with this thing.
Yeah. Well, that's the funny thing too, right? Because like a few years later, I mean, I remember being like 7, 8 years old, and I would watch. I loved watching like true crime stuff, like Cold Case and FBI Files, and you know those are real stories of people who've gone and abducted people or murdered people and stuff like that. But I was just like really into it and not so much scared as I was just kind of thrilled by it, I guess, you know?
Yeah.
But I got into those shows pretty young, and my mom would be like, Kevin, I don't think you should be watching these. But I was like...
For me, a big part was like the theme song. Like I remember there was, I think it was just a news show. It was like a tabloid news show called Current Affairs. Mm-hmm. But there was one particular episode, their theme song was just like, and I remember like they did one episode, it was like something related to the Jack the Ripper, and it was a combination of them doing it on Jack the Ripper and then like their sound effect of like, and it just, I don't know, for some reason I always just associated it as a creepy thing. There was shows like Unsolved Mysteries.
Oh yeah, I love that show.
Well, it's so creepy because not only did they have a really creepy song, but every story was unsolved.
Yeah.
So it's like always ended with like, and he might still be out there.
Oh, actually, that's not the show I was thinking of, actually. Okay, you're talking about Unsolved Mysteries.
Yeah.
I was thinking of Fact or Fiction Beyond Belief. Did you ever watch that one?
Oh, was that the one where like they would sometimes give you like 2 true stories and a fake one, and you'd have to figure out which one?
So they'd ask you after each one, and they'd be like, do you think this is fact or fiction?
Right.
Not this time. This was entirely made up by... you know, the writers of this show.
And you're like, thanks for wasting my time.
Yeah. But then there would be like another one where they're like, was it fact or fiction? This one was true. And you're like, what? No way.
It'd be the one that you wouldn't want to be true. And you're like, God damn it. But,
or like the least believable one.
Yeah.
You know?
Like watching those now, I mean, I think I'd be entertained by a lot of those things now, but they wouldn't even slightly freak me out. But as a child, those things were freaky, man.
But again, it's like... it's sort of like, they don't freak you out, but they just have that vibe of being kind of eerie, you know, which I like. It's that kind of like,
it's like that kind of feeling where it just kind of sends like a chill down your spine. You're not necessarily like running for the hills, but you're just kind of like, ooh, like I feel like less is good in the world. But yeah, I don't know. And again, I mean, I don't know if you have seen any of those Unsolved Mystery episodes, but apparently a lot of people my age were freaked out by it. And I think a lot of it was just the music. It just had a really good theme that was creepy.
That's the power of music for sure.
Yeah.
I would like to watch more of that show, but I think a lot of them are on Tubi,
hopefully by now,
actually.
some of them maybe have been solved since then.
Yeah,
I would like to think.
Who knows, right?
Yeah. There's also Rescue 911, which I used to watch, which it didn't have like the freaky music, but it had just freaky incidences where you're just like, Jesus Christ, that's like a scenario that could happen.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Yeah, we were briefly talking about Goosebumps and Afraid of the Dark, which I'm actually glad you brought up because I didn't even put those on my list. I completely kind of was focusing more on like kind of movies and stuff.
Oh, okay,
but
good.
I don't know.
I'm glad I brought them up.
Yeah. Do you have much else you'd like to say about either of those shows? I don't know if there's one you watched more than others.
Probably Are You Afraid of the Dark? Although I don't have like super vivid memories of it. Just kind of, again, kind of the vibe of the shows and I really liked, the
Yeah.
atmosphere, and I thought they were clever, simple little stories that were very effective at being told in a short time frame. And I don't know, they've just got a great vibe. Like, I mean, so many kids in the 90s grew up watching those shows.
Well, there's actually one Are You Afraid of the Dark episode that was the inspiration for The Sixth Sense. So,
oh, really?
Yeah. If there's one great legacy to the horror genre that show did, was it inspired a great horror movie.
Yeah. Is that what M. Night Shyamalan said? He was like, yes, I was inspired by this thing. Interesting.
Yeah. No, I think
I hadn't heard that before.
I think he even downplayed it more than that. He was like, I basically ripped off an Afraid of the Dark episode. I mean, it's quite different. What he did with it was fairly different. But as far as the whole,
you have to extrapolate
the character revealing that they're a ghost that they didn't maybe realize. Yeah, no, it's
well, it's concepts like that, right? Like they're very high concept types of episodes and little stories, right? So you get a number of imaginative little ideas like that.
Yeah,
and obviously the Goosebumps books was a thing too. I don't know how familiar were you with those two shows, and how similar were they?
They were fairly similar, but I mean, I always knew the difference. Because, so Afraid of the Dark came first. One thing that's really neat about both of these shows, being a kid growing up in the 90s, is that I was very aware that these were both Canadian shows. Okay. I don't know how well aware you were of it when you were watching them, but I was like...
when I was watching them, I had no idea.
Yeah, I think most of them... Afraid of the Dark was actually made by like a French-Canadian company. I don't know if that means that they were filming them in Quebec.
Well, I know that some of them were filmed here because my cinematographer, the cinematography instructor that I had in film school actually had worked on a bunch of Are You Afraid of the Dark?
Now,
so I think a lot of that was shot.
The show's been rebooted a couple of times, though. Do you know if he worked on the original Are You Afraid?
Yeah, he did.
He did
in like the early 90s or something.
And they were filmed out here, some of them.
Yeah, that's my understanding.
It would be great to know that they maybe just shot them across the country, depending on maybe what child actors they were using or so.
Yeah,
that would be really neat if it was a sort of across the board Canadian show. I will say this. I don't know about the continuing series of Goosebumps, but I remembered I was trick-or-treating as a kid in the mid-90s, and they were on Halloween night filming the pilot episode of Goosebumps while I was which was The Haunted Mask, which is a Halloween themed one. Did you ever see The Haunted Mask?
No.
So it was really marketed really big because it was the first Goosebumps episode, and YTV was doing this whole
well, and the books were probably such a big thing already. By
I had the book. I actually had quite a lot of Goosebumps books growing up. So I had The Haunted Mask, and I had a lot of the early R.L. Stine Goosebumps.
Yeah.
So I was really familiar with that story. And from what I remember, for that particular one, it was actually pretty truthful to the book. And it's creepy. It's about a girl who, she gets this rubber Halloween mask. And after she puts it on, she has a hard time taking it off each time, and it gets more difficult. And then eventually on Halloween night, when she puts it on, it like seals itself to her face. And so on Halloween, me and my friends, we would just see like this film crew, and we would see the girl in the mask. And I guess maybe it was just, classic saving money on production. And they're like, we'll just film it actually on Halloween. We get a whole bunch of houses already decorated. We get some free trick-or-treaters. And then it was the following Halloween after that year that it aired on television.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Man, that's really cool. That would be pretty sweet to come across when you're, out trick-or-treating.
Well, the funny thing was, we didn't know it was Goosebumps. We just knew that they were filming something.
Oh, so how did you find that out then?
Well, I reckon it was because I made note of the girl in the mask. Like I saw her, and then... and it's true. Maybe it was somewhat mentioned that it was Goosebumps. We just didn't know what the episode was, I guess.
Okay.
Somehow we figured it out. But I mean, I recognized the girl in the mask. And then, so yeah, it was just neat that next year, it was just a big production because they were starting a new, I think they called it, what did they call it? It was like YTV's like Dark Night or Dark Hour. It was something like that. And it was just like a marathon on Halloween of Are You Afraid of the Dark episodes? And then it was the debut of Goosebumps, and they had a couple of other things lined up. And yeah, it was just a great time to be a kid.
Yeah, I know.
And yeah, I loved both. I think I probably gravitated a little bit more towards Are You Afraid of the Dark than Goosebumps. I found Are You Afraid of the Dark to have a little bit more edge,
Yeah,
maybe.
I would probably say the same. Although, as I say, I didn't really watch too much Goosebumps. That was another one of those weird things. Like, there's a number of things when I was growing up that my parents wouldn't let me watch or consume or have anything to do with, because it was sort of like, again, growing up in a very Catholic home, it was like considered spiritually, this is like gonna possess you and pervert your mind or something. Like, I wasn't allowed to watch or read Harry Potter. We weren't allowed to go trick-or-treating. Weren't allowed to watch Goosebumps. Goosebumps was on the blacklist, the Catholic blacklist, you might say.
What about Davy and Goliath? A lot of Davy and Goliath episodes?
I don't know what that is.
Oh, it's this it's this old claymation TV show that was very religious themed.
I know what you're talking
about. A boy and his dog, the dog.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about now. I never saw it, but for instance, like, as I say, we watched like Adventures in Odyssey, for instance.
Right.
But and it's not that like everything was off limits. I mean, we watched Willow, as I say.
Yeah, I mean, there's weird. There was some dark stuff in.
There was just some strange sort of contradictions, right? Where it's like some things were considered, too spiritually corrupt or demonic, or I don't know. And other things that were comparable were not. So
was it maybe just that your parent, when you were allowed to watch stuff like Willow, was it maybe just ignorance on your parents' part, thinking it was a lot lighter than it was? Maybe. Yeah,
it could have been, and I think a lot of it had to do with sort of the.
Maybe it has to do with the title, Willow.
No, I think
fuck Goosebumps.
I think it had a lot more to do with sort of what the conversation was within their community, right? It's like, what was the stuff that everybody universally shunned, so to speak,
if
in the kind of Catholic Christian community and of families and friends and stuff.
If Lord of the Rings had come out earlier, or if you were younger when Lord of the Rings came out, would your parents have been okay with that?
I think so, because we used to watch the animated ones. Like, we watched the animated Hobbit and Return of the King, and my mom was quite a fan of the books. Like, she at least grew up and had read them growing up, or when she was younger anyway, and we had a copy of them and stuff. So, those weren't off limits. And that's where I say, like, it was very inconsistent. But I do remember my brother got into, like, some fantasy books, and my mom ended up, like, I think she, like, confiscated them or something. And Jeffrey was always watching or getting video games and had to kind of sneak playing, like, The Legend of Zelda, as I recall. I don't know, lots of things like that. The
most extreme thing that my parents did, and I remember it was actually quite traumatic at the time, was one year for Christmas I got I think like in a stocking stuffer I got some like horror, like they were like horror movie cards. Mm-hmm. Like collectible cards.
Oh, cool.
And I remember I opened them up, and I think my parents bought them just thinking that they were kind of like innocent horror cards. They didn't realize that they were like depicting like modern kind of gory horror movies.
Oh, okay.
So when I opened up the package, the first card was actually from the Addams Family, which my mom loved. So she was like, "Oh yeah, this is exactly what I wanted my son to have." Mm-hmm. And then as I start like going through the other cards, it's getting
You've got like Jason impaling.
It's like Jason and Hellraiser and all this stuff. And my parents were like, "This is what we got you," and so they forced me to throw these cards in the fire. Like we had like it was like a Christmas fireplace going, and they were like, and I remember like I tried to go and hide the cards. The irony was that my parents got me. It was one of the few gifts they got me that I loved, and I loved it so much that they were like, "Oh, this is horrible for him." So now together we will make you throw in the fire the gift that you love. And I mean, looking back, it would have been harmless. Terrible. It would have had there's no way it would have been a bother for me. But I guess they felt that I was a little bit too young, because I think, to be fair, I did get these cards cards before I started to really delve into horror movies, like adult horror movies.
But how sad that they made you burn this thing that you really liked. You know?
Literally, just I had this for no more than a few minutes.
Yeah.
And I loved it. It wasn't like, oh, he doesn't like it and he shouldn't have it. It was like, he was like, nah, they knew that I didn't want to get rid of these things.
Well, it's like the whole taking candy away from a baby kind of thing, right? It's like, just don't give it the candy. Well, but it's that much harder if you then have to take it away. Yeah,
it clearly didn't remove my love for horror movies. So, I mean, I don't know what the goal was there.
I think a lot of parents, they're trying to figure it out as they are becoming parents. And
well, I think it's like your parents said, with Lord of the Rings. It's like if they grew up with it and loved it, it's guaranteed to be okay. If they
like
grew
you
up
said
with
that with your mom too, right? Like
the things that the movies
liked.
that she was traumatized by, she assumed that it would have the exact same effect on me, not knowing that it's different over time and other generations. I had seen a lot of other stuff already that would have prepared me for the stuff that she wouldn't have been able to have handled. But anyways, maybe just I remember I brought up Addams Family in that card deck. Maybe it's a good segue to talk about Addams Family a bit. I don't know.
Yeah, definitely.
That was another one of the really early movies I saw in theaters, like one of the earliest ones for me. So again, it's a special one.
And Addams Family is such a cultural, has such a cult following, such a cultural, iconic intellectual property and franchise and stuff. It's so beloved. And it's one of those things that I've heard a lot about, which, it makes a lot of sense that I would be into it because, it's like dark humor. And again, the aesthetic is just like right up my alley. But I had not consumed a single piece of Addams Family content until maybe a couple of years ago when I watched the 1991 film.
Yeah.
And I think that's still maybe the only one that I've watched.
Oh, okay.
Not out of a lack of want. It's just since I wasn't since I didn't grow up with it, I guess it always just kind of sat there out in the ether. But I watched that first movie and really liked it.
I think it's great. It's almost like a perfect movie. Again,
it kind of falling into that dark humor, family friendly sort of territory.
Well, I feel like it holds up very well. It's the reason why I think the movie's so good is it's great performances, great writing, great direction. The cinematography is very fast paced, which is why I feel like you could still show that to a lot of young people today. And I think it would live up more to a lot of the more recent sort of Addams Family things that have been made.
Yeah. Well, it's beautiful. It's a beautiful movie.
Yeah. It's almost like the great Tim Burton movie that he never made.
Yeah. I know that's pretty much hit the nail on the head there. And it's got that classic early 90s vibe too, which I just love. I love movies from that era, They kind of feel a little bit old, but just, I don't know, I guess that was the period when I was growing up. So
if there's anything that could date the movie, it's some of the early 90s elements, but even then it's done just right that it doesn't really age the movie for the most part. I find there's a little bit of early 90s rap, but for the most part it's more just a gag sort of saying oh yeah, this is the Addams Family in the modern world,
right?
And right. I don't feel it really takes away from that. The other thing is, I guess, a lot of people's probably introduction to the Addams Family is the old classic TV show from the 60s.
Yeah. And I want to ask you a little bit about that. Just one quick question. I was reading the Sean Astin biography recently, and he was talking about how his dad played Gomez Addams. But I'm like, was it in the original show or was it in the...
Yeah, it was the original show.
Really?
John Astin was...
John Astin.
And to be fair, because I was always confused about John Astin being Sean Astin's dad. As far as I actually know, he's... I don't think John Astin's actually his blood-related father. I think he's actually more of a stepfather to Sean Astin.
Oh, okay. Maybe you're right.
But yeah, he was the original, television Gomez. I mean, I guess technically he's the first live-action actor to portray Gomez.
Yeah. That's pretty, it's pretty classic.
Yeah.
That's a big profile kind of thing.
I remember they rebooted the show in the late 90s, and they actually brought John Astin on to be like the grandfather. He was like he was the father of Gomez in like the reboot one, and it was neat because the actor playing Gomez in the 90s show was kind of, he wasn't just playing Gomez, but he was trying to do the John Astin kind of Gomez.
Oh, okay. They should have just brought Sean Astin on. He would have been about the right age, maybe, or maybe not quite.
Actually, he would have been the right age. He just wouldn't have been the right person.
yeah, right.
He's again like, maybe if he was actually related to John Astin, there'd be maybe a lot more of those qualities. But again, I was always sort of like, yeah, I don't see any John Astin in this guy.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it must have been neat having him as your dad. It's funny, yeah, the John Astin Gomez is actually a much more like optimistic, kind of lighthearted Gomez. Not that the Gomez in the movies isn't, but the Gomez in the movies he's a little bit more exotic. Raul Julia's got the accent, you know, while John Astin plays a very American Gomez.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. It's almost like if it wasn't for the suit, actually even the suit isn't all that weird. Like he's almost like one of the more regular family members in that show, where just if he was the dad with another family, he could almost have been a normal dad in a way.
Yeah.
Like if you see John Astin on other stuff, he's not very different to how he plays Gomez.
Is that original show, is it basically done like a sitcom?
Yeah, it's got canned laughter.
Oh, okay,
as far as I know, here's like a little like funny bit, was apparently the set was actually painted pink, and it just had to do with the way it came off in black and white footage. But it's funny to think in this gloomy gothic kind of show, it was actually like a pink set.
Yeah.
I don't know, there's not like a whole lot that's really referenced on that show. I've noticed that in the last few years, Wednesday dancing has kind of become a meme. Have you ever seen that? Right. It's Wednesday and Lurch, and she's kind of teaching him how to dance.
In the new show, you mean?
No, in the old
show?
1960s show.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's black and white, and it's like become like a little meme. Like they'll usually throw a modern day song over Wednesday, doing a little dance with Lurch.
Oh, okay.
That's the only thing of recent years I could think of.
Because I know they had like a very pop in the Wednesday show, like the one that Tim Burton did.
Yeah.
They had like a dance sequence with Wednesday, and everybody was kind of jumping on that. That kind of became this trending.
Yeah, I could be wrong, but I wouldn't be surprised if the whole reason that they even did that Wednesday dance was to actually reference that meme of Wednesday dancing.
I feel like it must have been. Yeah.
It's funny because in the show, Wednesday is like probably the youngest adaptation of Wednesday. In the show, she's like 7 or 8.
Okay.
While the Christina Ricci movies, she's kind of more around 11 or 12. And then in the new Wednesday show, she's like a teenager, if not older.
She did so many of those types of shows. Hey, I feel like Christina Ricci really kind of got typecast in that type of thing. Like, you know, she was in Casper. She was in Beetlejuice.
No, she wasn't in Beetlejuice. You're thinking of Winona Ryder for Beetlejuice.
Oh, yeah.
But,
okay, never mind. But she was in Sleepy Hollow, and obviously in Wednesday.
Here's one that might blow your mind. I don't know if you're familiar with this trivia. Christina Ricci almost was cast as Claudia in Interview with a Vampire.
Oh, yeah, I remember hearing that.
She would. I think Kristen Dunst was perfect, but Christina Ricci wouldn't have been bad either.
Yeah, it wouldn't have been. That's not one of those alternatives where you're like, oh, thank God that didn't happen.
It's funny.
You know?
Apparently, in the 90s, almost every role that Kirsten Dunst and Christina Ricci did, the other one auditioned for. Like they were they were I think they were each other's main competitors in a lot of ways. Like, not that there wasn't like a feud, but just
imagine Kirsten Dunst in Sleepy Hollow.
Yeah. Or
I could see it working.
Or what about Kirsten Dunst and Casper?
Yeah, I mean that could have
that would have been like the Jumanji kind of era.
Worked. Yeah, sure.
It would have been different. I'm glad. I'm glad everything turned out the way it did with those castings. But I could easily picture the switch.
Alternate. Yeah. Or imagine Christina Ricci in Spider-Man. I don't know.
Interesting. Yeah. Christina Ricci now I'm just thinking of Christina Ricci with red hair, which I don't think I've ever seen, but that would be interesting. Yeah. But well, I don't know. We've talked a little bit about Casper in one of our other shows. Do we want to chat about, is there anything else we want to add to Casper that we haven't already said?
Yeah. Well, the funny thing is I did rewatch it since we filmed that episode, so I'm a little more familiar with it now. You know, it's not like an amazing movie. I just find it to be kind of a lighthearted, fun sort of kids movie.
Yeah.
And a lot of that stuff is like, yeah, it's great to watch when you're that age and to become familiar with it. And I don't know, it's nice getting to grow up with some of that stuff.
Yeah. I kind of avoided it for the first few years after it came out because I just felt it came at a time when I was avoiding kind of kids movies.
Yeah, yeah.
But
you were trying to age out of that stuff.
I kind of was, and then because I love ghosts and anything horror, I eventually watched it. I probably watched it. It probably wasn't as far off as I thought. I just think I waited till it came to video.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things I like a lot about it is like the set, the house is really a great set.
I think it would have been a ton of fun to work on that. Probably.
Yeah. It has a lot of almost, in a weird way, a lot of the qualities that I feel maybe Hocus Pocus has, where it's a fun, lighthearted kind of Halloween kind of movie.
Yep.
You don't have to really concentrate or think too hard on it. You just kind of let the movie flow through you. And
I mean, it's a little bit silly and stuff.
Sure.
Like I look at it and it's like, okay, this isn't like great, but again, just if you're looking for something lighthearted
it's definitely the best
wash over you.
It's the best Casper movie so far. We can agree on that, probably, right?
Yeah. Have they made any others?
Well, probably not like to that Hollywood. There was like a made for TV. Wasn't like Hilary Duff and like a Casper and Wendy the Witch.
Oh, maybe you're
TV
right.
movie or something like that.
Casper and Wendy.
Yeah,
I think it was. Yeah.
But
well, so yeah, we don't have to say too much about it. But you did mention Hocus Pocus, which is something worth talking about.
Yeah, so that's another one I saw in theaters when it came out. I think it was around my sister's birthday, and we went to go see it. What are your thoughts on Hocus Pocus?
Well, I have seen it, but I don't remember it super well. It was a number of years ago that I watched it the first time and the only time.
Yeah.
Well, I think all those widgets are super ugly for starters.
Oh, even Sarah. See, like to me, I'm like, that might be the movie where Sarah Jessica Parker looks better than ever in her career. When I was a kid, I kind of had a crush on the Sarah Jessica Parker character, but I think that's also because they pushed her as the sexy witch in comparison to the other two. Well, God, don't watch the new one, which I haven't seen. But if you thought they were ugly in the original, they're way older in the new one. So stay away.
Have you seen the second one?
No.
Oh, okay.
No. But
I like, to be honest, I'd kind of like to go and do a rewatch of the first one and watch the second one.
Yeah.
I'll have to do it as like a double feature.
If there's one thing I will say positively about the original movie, because I don't mind them. I don't think it's a bad movie. It's just I have so many other kind of movies I had on my list that I just kind of preferred.
Yeah.
But they do a really good job at just the atmosphere of Halloween, but more importantly, just like autumn and fall. It's set in Salem, and it's just that kind of that town has a great Halloween feel and look to it. Because a lot of the movies that we have on our list probably aren't genuinely Halloween movies, and that probably not a lot of them are actually taking place around Halloween, but Hocus Pocus does. And in that regard, it's a really good Halloween movie if you're wanting something that's a truly Halloween film. I think it's great at that. I think the thing I'll probably say with most of these kids movies, or just most movies in general, is that I wish every movie was rated R. So to me, I would have loved it if Hocus Pocus was a rated R movie and they made it more of like a genuine witch movie.
Yeah.
Then it would have been even better. But
you do got to keep some things reserved for that category of, just being G-rated family film content kind of thing. Hey.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's a Disney one, right? So, we definitely have a few Disney ones on our list, but, I don't know. I like the look of the witch. Like, I think they're iconic witches.
They are.
I used to have a really big crush on. Well, this was the weird thing about my age when I saw that movie was, I remember I had a crush on Thora Birch and Vanessa Shaw, because I think I was technically younger than both of them, so it wasn't too creepy having a crush on Thora Birch when I saw that movie. But I remember I was just sort of like, oh yeah, like that older teenager girl, she's really cute. But Thora Birch is kind of cute too. And then since then, I'm now way older than both of them. But I have grown up to be I grew up to be quite a fan of Thora Birch's movie. Like that was my intro to Thora Birch, and then she ended up doing a lot of legitimately good movies later in the 90s.
She was in Ghost World and
American Beauty. Yeah. She was almost it was almost like she was becoming she was almost going to become like the next like Janine Garofalo, almost kind of based on her characters, where she started playing these very kind of like sarcastic alternative kind of girls.
Oh, okay.
But then she also then kind of disappeared. Like you don't really like, you know, after around the 90s, like her career really did kind of slow down a lot. But at the time, yeah, she was in a lot of stuff, and Hocus Pocus was the one I first remembered her from.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know, Doug, if you know Doug Jones, he became a very well-known sort of creature performer. He did a lot of stuff with Guillermo del Toro.
Oh, Doug Jones.
His first movie is Hocus Pocus. He plays Billy, the
is
sort
that
of
right,
the
hey?
zombie henchman of the witches.
Oh, that is interesting.
Yeah.
It's like he went from that to Pan's Labyrinth.
Pan's Labyrinth, Shape of Water.
Yeah.
A whole bunch of he's like the Gillman in the Hellboy movies. And yeah. I don't know if you have too much else to say about Hocus Pocus. You know, DiCaprio turned it down. He was offered a role in Hocus Pocus as the cat, the talking cat character.
Oh, okay. So let's see. I wonder what he would have been doing otherwise around that time. Because
probably Gilbert Grape, I'm thinking.
1993. Yeah, that's probably about the time Gilbert Grape came out, or maybe like the Basketball Diaries. Let me see. Looking up DiCaprio's thing here. Well, so yeah, that would have been interesting if he'd been in that. I don't know. Can you picture him in that role?
It's funny because it would have mainly been his voice. You'd only really have seen him in the beginning and the end of the movie.
Yeah.
Maybe that's also why he kind of turned it down.
They just wanted to capitalize on his like image and stuff.
I think they were pushing. Okay,
1993.
It probably would have been the beginning of a Disney relationship that they were going for, and I think he just wasn't wanting to do that.
Yeah. Well, let's see. So he'd done Growing Pains, but he was that year he was in This Boy's Life and What's Eating Gilbert Grape.
Yeah. So fair enough.
You know, probably better options for his acting career in terms of being taken seriously as an actor, you know?
Yeah.
But yeah, fair enough.
I've got some more titles on my list, but I'm sure you do as well. So I don't know. Yeah, do you want to throw another title out there or
Yeah, I felt like there was a good segue into something. We could maybe move into like the Disney Channel original movies that I had in mind.
Yeah, I've got one on my list. I've got one Disney one. So maybe do you want to? Maybe you'll say yours.
What's this one you were?
Okay, so yeah, I was earlier before the show. I was mentioning to Kevin how there's a Disney, like a sort of a Halloween TV Disney movie that I saw that I'd be very surprised if Kevin had seen this because it's a real staple from the 80s. Some of our older listeners might be familiar with it. It's technically 2 TV movies because it had a sequel. Which means it must have had a relative success to get a sequel.
Yeah.
But I remember
I'm wondering
this one really freaked me out as a kid. It might have been like the first thing I really saw as a kid that kind of freaked me out, where I felt I was watching a real horror movie.
How old do you think you were when you watched this?
3.
Oh, okay. So very young.
Yeah, 3 or 4. And so it's from like I want to say like 1986, maybe is when it came out. It's Mr. Boogedy. And this was like a made-for-TV Disney movie. There was Mr. Boogedy, and then a few years later, they did the sequel Bride of Boogedy. And if I was just a little bit older, it would have been fine. Like, you watch these movies now. If anybody knows what I'm talking about, I bet this movie traumatized you too. Because
if they watched it that young, maybe.
Mr. Boogedy was like an actual kind of freaky character. Like, he almost looked like Freddy Krueger, but with like a hood. And he was like this ghostly spirit that was kind of haunting the basement of this family. And the father of this family basically kind of ran like a jokester kind of prank store. So around Halloween, he would have all of these like jokey gimmicks that he would like put around the house. So most of the movie has kind of got all these like zany gags until like they then discover they've actually got a real sort of ghost in their basement. And I think it's just the fact that Mr. Boogedy, he just like shouts a lot. Like he looks like he kind of looks like Freddy Krueger.
I'm Mr. Boogedy.
And then he'd just be like, "Ah!" I'm boogity, boogity, boogity. And you're just like, holy
That
shit.
does sound scary. That sounds like a terrifying movie.
Well, again, it's that thing I was saying earlier where you have no other reference for anything kind of scary.
Yeah.
So I remember just in the first house we lived in, like we all lived in our basement, like that's where all of our rooms were. So I was just sort of like, oh god, like Mr. Boogedy's gonna be in the basement, and
He was the boogity man under your bed.
yeah. And I think these movies used to be available on YouTube. I don't know if they're still available now. There's definitely like little clips I found, but I don't know if you could find the full episodes.
Like, no, these movies are too disturbing, too traumatizing. We have to take them off YouTube.
Yeah. And besides, Disney's going to do a Mr. Boogedy reboot, so they want to keep it fresh.
Yeah, when are they going to do that?
Well, I don't know. But funny enough, I don't know. Yeah, like the daughter in the first Mr. Boogedy was actually Christy Swanson, who went on to become the first Buffy the Vampire Slayer, not in the TV show, but in the movies. And she had a successful career with some other movies in like the late 80s, early 90s too. But yeah, that was one of the early things she did, was she was like the daughter. One of the boys grew up to be the son in Married with Children. And yeah, I don't know. It's very Halloween-y. Like unlike some of the other movies, again, we talk about, like Mr. Boogedy and Bride of Boogedy both kind of take place actually around Halloween time. They might be a little bit dated now. I don't know if really they'd be all that effective for a person watching today for the first time, but definitely anybody who grew up with these, there's a lot, I think there'd be a lot of nostalgia for people my age who grew up with Mr. Boogedy.
Yeah, I would guess so too. You're right. I mean, I haven't heard of it, so.
Other than after the 80s, like it just kind of disappeared. I'm guessing Bride of Boogedy wasn't a very big hit. Otherwise, they might have just kept making Boogedy movies.
Yeah, but it was kind of one of those products of its time, hey? Yeah,
it's one of those ones where I think, again, it's like very effective and scary if you're a young child. But if you're even like a young adult, it's fairly cringy to get through the Boogedy.
It was a movie, hey?
They're TV movies.
I wonder if it's on Disney Plus.
It'd be
because Disney Plus does
yeah.
have a lot of the movies that I'm about to talk about.
Okay, yeah.
Well, so for instance, were you familiar with the Halloween Town movies?
I'm familiar with it. Like I know that they existed, but I never watched any of them.
Oh, okay. I think there was like 3 of them.
Isn't like Debbie Reynolds in it?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
I mean, again, so these are ones that were actually Halloween themed movies. So I think they kind of have maybe solidified themselves as holiday classics.
Yeah.
In that sense, in that it's like, hey, you've only got so many movies that are actually Halloween themed. But, I mean, they're typical like Disney Channel TV movie fare that you would expect. They're not amazing, but it's kind of a fun concept in that this young girl, she's like, in junior high or whatever, and finds out that she's comes from a line of witches. And, they're like good witches or whatever. It's like her and her mom and her grandmother. I think Debbie Reynolds is the grandmother, pretty sure.
That makes sense, yeah.
And so, as I recall, there's bad witches and there's good witches, but she's like from this line of good witches. And so she's kind of learning about being a witch from the 2 previous generations, right? Her mom and her grandmother. A great family film in that sense, because there's this sort of family legacy theme going on there, right? So I think that people can kind of probably associate to that a little bit. And I don't know, like they're fun holiday films that you might want to revisit just as light holiday films that kind of show you a good relationship between this young girl and her mom and her grandmother. I feel like there's value in having good familial relationships modeled in TV and movies, because a person might not be getting that at home. Mm-hmm. So you might have like a shitty family, but if you see like good families on TV, it's good to see a representation of what a good family kind of looks like, or what good familial relationships look like.
Yeah, and I think Disney's also always been good at kind of depicting like broken homes, but showing that even a broken home can be a good home. you know, but there's like a lot of storylines where maybe they're being raised by a single parent or even by their grandparents, but it's the fact that they're in a supportive, loving environment. Because not all, you know, I think that's like an important win because they probably know a lot of kids. Hell, it's kind of crazy that the norm in this day and age, like it's rare to actually be raised in a full, you know, traditional family unit in this day and age. And also though the movie must have been fairly decent if it scored 2 sequels. There must have been something that the movie did right.
Well, that's just it. I think it was fairly popular as a Disney Channel original movie. And not all of those were, you know. I mean, some of them were very popular. Like you had the popularity of the High School Musical movies, which became so popular that they became theatrical films eventually. But yeah, I think as far as being Disney Channel TV movies, they were pretty beloved and successful and well remembered.
Did you see all of them?
I think that I have. To be honest, I'm not super familiar with any of them because to me they were kind of like, I guess maybe it's because they were about female characters. I was like, oh, these are like chick flick Disney Channel TV movies.
Yeah.
But I still kind of enjoy them nowadays. But maybe as a teenager and, an adolescent, I wasn't as into them. I was instead watching things like, really great movies, like classics. Like I'm talking like Mom's Got a Date with a Vampire, which is, I think, probably one of the greatest vampire movies out there.
I think it made a sweep at the Nickelodeon Awards that year.
I would think that it should have, but it was very overlooked, unfortunately.
It's always politics, you know?
There's just no love for Mom's Got a Date with a Vampire.
Well, it's funny because, yeah, I always remembered, it always reminded me of, and I don't even know if I saw the whole thing, but there was also like an 80s one called, I think it was just called like I think My Mom is a Werewolf.
Oh, okay.
And so instead of her like dating the monster, she kind of becomes the monster and is like, oh God, how am I going to deal with these dates when I'm turning into a werewolf? And again, just me being a kid, I loved werewolves. So anything werewolf related, even if it was a mom becoming a werewolf, I was kind of like, you had me at werewolf. I'm in. But I don't have very strong memories of it. I don't even think it was a Disney movie, but it had that Disney quality to it. I mean, it was definitely a made-for-TV thing for children.
Yeah. Well, I will say this about Mom's Got a Date with a Vampire. Now, this is a movie that I love to watch like every single year. I'm so familiar with this movie, and I don't exactly even know what it is. It's just it has that kind of modern, like it takes place in the modern world, but it's like this. It has this gothic sort of presence because there's this vampire guy, and he's this cool British dude. The actor who plays the vampire, I should go find out his name because, it's worth mentioning who he actually is. But he usually does more kind of supporting roles in other movies. But he was great as this vampire. He just kind of has this charisma. And the guy who plays the vampire hunter, like Van Helsing or whatever, is it's the dad in Lizzie McGuire. So depending how familiar you are with all this Disney stuff, like the dad in Lizzie McGuire is the vampire hunter, and I don't. Like,
is he known for any other? For some reason, I want to say like the dad's not Robert Carradine, is he?
Yeah.
Is it Robert Carradine? Oh shit!
He was in Revenge of the Nerds.
Yeah, he's in tons of stuff. Dude,
yeah.
He's
Robert
in Mean
Carradine.
Streets.
What?
Yeah, he's in Mean Streets.
Why the fuck is he in Mean Streets?
So he kills his brother in Mean. So okay, you know how David. Okay, we're gonna take a slight break from the horror conversation. We're gonna just quickly talk about Mean Streets. Okay,
and Robert Carradine.
You know how David Carradine is in Mean Streets?
No.
Do you know who David Carradine is though? Like Kill Bill.
Well, yeah.
So he's in Mean Streets. He plays a drunk who gets shot in the bar. Or he gets shot in the bathroom.
Oh, that's David
And they're-
Carradine?
that's
But
David
Such a
Carradine.
small role.
I know it is. And then there's like this young guy who he like pulls out this like long hair. He's got like a ponytail and he pulls out this long hair and then he shoots David Carradine.
Yeah.
That's Robert Carradine.
So Robert Carradine shoots David Carradine.
in Mean Streets, yeah.
Oh, fuck.
He was like he was probably like
Wow.
early 20s. Like he was really young.
I
in
know
this.
exactly
Yeah.
what you're talking about, though.
Yeah.
Oh, fuck me.
So I know my Robert Carradine. Yeah, it's
Okay, well,
it's
frick.
sad that he went from Mean Streets to the dad and Lizzie McGuire. But I mean, I guess there's probably a whole new generation that knows him as
Well-
the dad and not from Main Streets.
Yeah.
But
And not
Yeah.
the guy from Revenge of the Nerds.
yeah. That was actually
Which was
my
another
intro.
classic,
That was my intro to him. Was he made a great nerd.
Yeah, I remember
Yeah.
when I watched that, because I just watched that, like, I don't know, maybe 5-6 years ago or something, but like seeing him in that, and I was like, holy shit,
Yeah.
it's him. I don't know what he's done lately, but the guy who plays the vampire is Charles Shaughnessy. Do you know who that is?
No. Is he
was
well
good.
known for anything else?
Well,
Is he a
as I say,
Canadian guy?
I think so. He was in Mad Men. I remember seeing him play a bit of a role in Mad Men. Yeah, damn.
All right.
I'm not seeing like a lot of really notable stuff in his filmography here.
Yeah. Well, I mean, because we're talking about the most
But-
notable one.
Well, exactly.
Yeah.
Fuck, I love this movie. And I love him in it. But it's just, I don't know. There's some of those movies that you can't really explain what you love so much about it. I like the vibe. I think so it had Laura Vandervoort as the hot sister.
Okay.
And then there's like the kind of main kid who's like, 14 or whatever. And he was quite a enjoyable to watch young actor too. It's like kind of a shame that he didn't go on to do more stuff. Maybe had a little bit of like an Edward Furlong kind of vibe, but a little more like safe kind of.
Well, that's
I don't
good to
know.
hear. Yeah, because I mean, when you get compared to Edward Furlong, you're almost like, oh, maybe that's what happened to him. Is he continued to be like Edward Furlong?
No, I think just like more of a little more down to earth or a little more accessible or something.
Yeah.
But
He's probably doing a lot of Canadian because I imagine it was probably like a Canadian production. He's probably just doing
Well, it was filmed out in Toronto.
yeah.
And it has this scene where they like go to the carnival or whatever, and every damn time that I go to like the PNE or something nowadays, Playland, it's like, hey, I'm practically in this movie at this Mom's Got a Date with a Vampire carnival sort of thing. You got all these like sort of Halloween festivities going on, and then you have the whole gothic horror thing where it's like the vampire world, and the guy taking. Do you know who Caroline Ray is?
Oh, that sounds really familiar.
She's like, she plays the mom. I think she was, something of a.
I'm just trying to think
known
what else was she like a
actress at the time.
comedian?
I don't exactly know what she was known for, but I just remember
That
at
name
the time
sounds really familiar.
they would be doing like kind of some little behind the scenes segments, and
Yeah.
they're talking about her, like she was this notable.
Because I mean,
person.
usually they wouldn't get usually if you're like a real name, you wouldn't be seen in any of these like cheap Disney things. But when you're kind of like an up and comer, then that's when they would kind of grab you for some of these things. And so,
yeah,
but I definitely the name sounds really familiar. So there's a title I wanted to bring up just because it's one of the few that is very Halloween themed. And that would be Ernest Scared Stupid.
oh frick, I was meaning to watch that today too,
Yeah.
because I know you'd mentioned it.
Well,
and
you
I was
still
like,
can. I mean, there's not a ton of
yeah.
things I'll say about it. It's another one of those ones that it was another early movie I saw in theaters. I was also a big Ernest fan in general growing up. Like I was a fan.
I saw a bunch of those movies.
Yeah.
And like there were so many of them, right?
Yeah. Well,
But
for me, it was like a combination of two things I loved because I was already following the Ernest movies, and then once the next one in line was going to be like a horror Halloween themed one, I was just sort of like, oh man, well this is going to have to be my favorite one, like which is why it's probably the only one I saw in theaters.
yeah, I'm surprised it even went to theaters. Like, did all those movies go to theaters?
So, funny enough, it actually might be the last theatrical Ernest movie.
Oh, okay.
Either that or there might have been one more theatrical one that bombed so badly that one might have been the last one. Ernest Rides Again could be the last theatrical Ernest movie, and that might be the one that killed it, where after that they all became like straight to video. But yeah, or like some of those ones, again, like they were also made by I don't know when Disney got involved, but like the classic Ernest movies, I think are all Disney. Like Ernest Goes to Camp, Ernest Saves Christmas, Ernest Goes to Jail, and Ernest Scared Stupid. Those to me are kind of like the 4 legitimate Ernest movies. And
and like, so I'm most familiar with Ernest Saves Christmas.
Yeah.
And that does feel like a pretty legitimate movie. Like, it doesn't feel like it's totally been cheaped out on or whatever.
Yeah, no, it doesn't feel like a TV movie like some of the later ones did. Like, yeah, there was a period there where Ernest was quite popular. It was like in that same kind of era as, you know, like Pee Wee Herman and just a lot of these kind of like iconic kind of, I guess, I don't know, man children, if you had to call them that. But, and so, yeah, Ernest Scared Stupid, it's, well, what would I say about it? It's, so it involves like this kind of tree troll, or this troll who lives in a tree. And then near the end, there's a swarm of these trolls. And it was like a perfect design where these things were just creepy enough to kind of scare a kid. But if you were anything other than a kid, you would just be like, yeah, these are just kind of goofy monsters. But there was definitely like one scene in particular that I thought was genuinely kind of freaky as a kid watching Ernest. I don't know. I won't really give it away because I think you might actually
say it, like, because I probably will watch it, but it's not a movie that I care so much about that it's like, oh no, this important movie has been spoiled. Well,
so Ernest is like the main character. He's like your protagonist. But the thing that I guess was kind of creepy as a kid watching this movie is that the troll, like, kind of, for the basically what the troll's goal is he needs to kind of capture a certain amount of souls that he then kind of puts into the tree, where these kind of grubs start growing. And once he has enough souls to put into the tree, the grubs hatch and turn into his troll buddies, basically. But the thing that was that freaky was that it was always children's souls that the troll had to take. So he would...
Well, that always makes it scarier.
Yeah, and so Ernest has a whole gang. He's got a group of kids that hang out with him. You know, no real questions why this adult's hanging out with little kids. You can come up with your own theories. But kind of one by one, the troll kind of like comes after these kids and like turns them into like, he shrinks them down into like these little small wooden kind of artifacts.
See, that's another freaky thing that happens, right? It's like
the witches. You know?
I know. So that's exactly what I was going to say. And this is... that's a great example of where it's sort of these innocent things that happen, but in a weird way, they're kind of freakier. They're more imaginative. They're more
very
bizarre.
Fairy tale, like that Grimm's fairy tale kind of vibe.
Yeah.
And
you know? And this is actually something that I did want to say about the witches, and I remembered it now, is just that I found it kind of lame that the witches, their only objective is really just to like eliminate and destroy all children, as opposed to having some greater objective of what to do with them. Like, there's something very disturbing and grim about say like Hansel and Gretel, where it's like her plan is to lure these kids into her house, lock them up, fatten them up, and then cook them in her oven and eat them.
Yeah.
You know, for whatever purpose. You could probably write more depth into that too, and that she's consuming them to
you just say
maintain her eternal youth or whatever.
She's just a cannibal witch, right? That's what she likes. Yeah.
But that's like a lot more disturbing than this idea of just, wow, we just want to turn them into mice and squash them so that they will be completely eliminated and we won't have to deal with their stench, you know?
Yeah.
And that's where I find the witches kind of fails, is again, it's sort of this shallow motive and this shallow objective that the witches have. Whereas when you look at some of these other examples, it's just a lot more, disturbing, haunting. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
You can do a much better job especially if you get into like, say, things like, you know, they're using children for some kind of blood ritual or whatever it is.
Well, or even if you want to like kill a kid, like if you're a witch in the Witches, do you really need to like go through like the whole elaborateness of luring them with chocolate and then making them eat the chocolate so they turn into a mouse so that you can stomp them? Mm-hmm. Like, you're an adult and they're a child. Can't you just like lure them to somewhere where nobody's around and just stab them? Like, I mean, if the goal is just to kill children, do you really need to even turn them into mice? Like, there's so many other ways you could just kill. But again, you just end up with a much more disturbing movie that's not child friendly. So I get that. But it does seem like it's a lot of effort, you know, to get rid of children is to like turn them into mice. But I mean, whatever. I mean, I guess you lose kind of the whole fun of the story if you change the element of the mice. Yeah. But
I think especially with kids, there is an element of captivity, which is especially disturbing, you know, because it's that idea of like, they're still alive. They're still aware. They're kind of locked in a cage and they're at the mercy of whoever this freaky person is who's wanting to do whatever like sick shit they have planned for them.
Well, one thing they really dropped the gun. Oh, sorry, go on. Yeah.
What was I gonna say? Besides that, just I don't know. There's an element of the whole captivity thing, and maybe because it's partially relatable and that it's realistic too. Like, you know, kids being abducted is a thing that we see going on in our actual society, and it's kind of where does your imagination go with that? Like, you imagine a kid gets abducted and, you know, the horror story is what some people's actual life has turned out to be, where it's like they're kept in captivity for however many number of years. And, you know, they're like raped and just kept there as somebody's prisoner. I don't know. Maybe there's like an element of what is real about those situations that makes it disturbing too. I don't know.
Well, they also kind of missed out on an opportunity where, well, you saw the movie way more recently than I did, so maybe you'll correct me, but it's funny how in a movie where it's witches turning kids into mice, witches are very much associated with cats, like in having a cat. Yeah. And you'd think that there would have been more sequences of these witches having cats that would then chase and attack these mice. And I'm sure there probably was a cat sequence in the movie.
Yeah, there was.
Was it a witch's cat or was it just it was? Okay. Well, I'm glad that they at least had that, but yeah okay. Well,
yeah, because they go and they find this mouse trap with cheese on it. And of course the British kid wants to like eat the cheese. But the other kid who's smarter is like, we have to realize now we have two enemies, humans and cats. And so they end up encountering the head witch's cat at some point, and it's chasing the kid in a tree and trying to get at him and eat him.
Yeah.
And, you know, it was another one of those things where I felt like in the movie they just don't depict the kid, like kind of the trauma of being a mouse well enough. Like, as I say, like that transformation and becoming a mouse should be like this horrible catastrophic thing to the kids, but they sort of are just like happy-go-lucky about it.
From what I remember, the kid doesn't even really seem all that phased even from his own parents dying. Like, he's sad, but he's kind of like...
I don't think his parents die, though. Which parents?
The main boy, his parents die in a car accident. That's why he's being taken care of by his grandmother through the movie.
Oh, but do they depict that? I don't.
Well, that's my whole point, right? The fact that you don't even remember it kind of says a lot.
Yeah.
Basically, like the grandmother, the grandmother wakes up the boy, or she's kind of like, oh, they're gone, and I think they have a little hug, they embrace. And then it kind of moves on. The story kind of moves on.
Okay.
But in no way does the kid... well, that's the thing, is because the kid doesn't seem like his parents died. He kind of seems like he's just having a vacation with his grandmother.
Right. That was sort
but he's
of
an
like
orphan. He's a fucking orphan.
Yeah, okay.
And now he's an orphan who turned into a mouse. And he's fucking still...
and he's unfazed by
he's
everything.
He's still dealing better with life than I am. So it pisses me off. And
he doesn't seem fazed by much at all, does he?
So... even when he changes back at the end of the movie, he's kind of like, oh, this is great. Yeah. But he's not like, fucking, oh my God, this is a miracle. It's just, everything's just kind of like, cool. I don't know. Yeah. He's very adaptable, that kid.
Yeah. So, yeah, true.
Yeah.
It was, man, yeah. Some of those, just as we're sitting here talking, I don't know. I feel like we already talked about the witches, but I didn't get to maybe speak enough to those practical effects. Like we did get to talk about the mouse transformation, but another thing that I thought was really effective was when the head witch is like about to take her costume off, and she peels back her scalp.
Yeah.
And you just see what's underneath there, and it just hints at what's underneath her mask, and you're just like, oh gosh, that is just disgusting. Like, and then when she actually does take the thing off and she like reveals how, absolutely hideous
I want to know how
is.
she squeezes that nose into that mask, because when you look at the proportions,
I know,
it just doesn't work. But again, I don't know, magic, right? There's always the element of magic, Same thing with her ears. I think she's got like big old like Nosferatu like ears maybe or something.
And her whole facial structure is totally different. But I mean, again, the effects are really so well done, and she is so absolutely hideous to look at and disgusting to look at, which I think is good. It is a little bit cartoony once kind of her whole self is revealed. I think it was actually a lot more effective again when they were just kind of hinting and suggesting at things, right? When you just see glimpses of the scabs underneath their wigs, and when you see like her pulling back her scalp and seeing just a little bit of what's behind her mask, it's like, oh fuck.
Yeah. No, you could easily have like saved the reveal to the end.
That probably would have been more effective. Yeah, I think so.
Like right before she turns into a rat.
Keep hinting at it for the long period of time.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's probably a great point. It's kind of like how, well, I mean, I guess Jaws did sort of reveal the shark, like, about halfway through the movie. But I think a lot about how Darth Vader is revealed throughout Star Wars. How you get like, that scene where
in Empire,
the Admiral goes to like see Vader, and you just see like the back of his head,
and the helmet just goes on. Yeah.
I love stuff like that, man. It just triggers the imagination. You're like, because of course everybody's wondering what he looks like behind that mask the whole time.
And they're giving you a little taste.
Yeah. But then it's also so effective when they finally do the full reveal in Return of the Jedi, and it's like you're actually going to get to see him, but what is revealed is it's beautiful in a sense that he's just kind of this very unintimidating old man behind the mask. It's like he's just this. He's just a person.
He's an old, pasty British guy.
That's right. Yeah. He's just this old man and kind of broken and destroyed and.
But when he dies,
he's not the intimidating character that Darth Vader is, and it's I don't know. There's something incredibly like profound and beautiful and meaningful about that. In that it's not like he's this hideous monster or a scary villain. He's very relatable in a sense.
Yeah. Now, and it's funny because I guess there's probably definitely the groups of people who probably don't like the reveal of Darth Vader. They were like, no, I like the helmeted thing. I don't like knowing that that's what was underneath, right? So there's that side too, I guess. But I think
it's so important to like the development of his character, really, that he's revealed to be a human.
Yeah.
To reveal his humanity in that point after he's kind of turned.
Well, I remember you were always telling me that you always wished that they had actually deep faked Hayden Christensen's face onto the actor in Return of the Jedi.
Nice try. I think you're projecting things. I think you're projecting your own desire.
Well, it is funny though, but I do hate how
you're trying to float this idea.
I hate how in the special features after he dies, he does come back as a Hayden Christensen ghost.
I hated that too. That was such
very annoying.
That was such a bad.
It just doesn't make
change.
sense.
No, I know there was no purpose for it at all. But it's just. I actually like went and edited my own version of the movie because it just made because there were things that I liked about the special editions.
Yeah.
But I just hated some of those decisions. I hated the fact that they added him going no in Return of the Jedi when he throws Palpatine into the pit.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that.
Gosh. Yeah. It's like as if it wasn't bad enough in Revenge of the Sith, but then you had to add it in Return of the Jedi. No, no, that's exactly how I feel about it. But then adding Hayden Christensen, I just cut in a version of.
Well, it's not like Ewan McGregor is Obi-Wan. That's the thing that's so confusing.
Well, exactly. That's exactly it. Like, why would they?
Maybe what they're trying to say is that if you join the dark side, you will eternally stay young forever. And it's only when you're a Jedi that you'll see your age.
The benefits of the dark side.
I mean, there had to be some catch to joining the dark side. Yeah. Anyways, we've gone really off topic. So should we go to? I mean, yeah, there's lots of
Where were
movies we
we?
can
We were-
talk about. Well, the one we were, I guess, we kind of went back to the witches, but I mean, I don't know. I don't have much more to say.
We got
really
into
about the
talking
witches.
about Halloween Town and Mom's Got a Date with a Vampire.
Well, here's one we could. I was going to say a
Pocus.
new title, but it's one that we could definitely both talk a lot about because you watched it recently.
Sure.
But that's Monster Squad.
Oh yeah, definitely. That one's worth digging into. Yeah, that's a great movie. It's got that whole classic. You know what? As I was watching that, I was like, I'm sure those guys who made Stranger Things must have been very aware of Monster Squad.
Yeah, I hope so.
Because
Yeah.
like with the radios they're using and stuff.
Yeah.
And again, that seemed to be like kind of a bit of a common thing that was going on with movies in the 80s, like that depict kids. I mean, you had E.T., you had the Goonies, like this whole thing of adolescent kids riding around on their bicycles, communicating with walkie-talkies and going on these adventures and encountering supernatural events and circumstances and whatnot.
Well,
It was such it happened so many times in the 80s movies.
Yeah.
You had the Explorers.
That's right.
Which
yeah.
did that kind of thing.
The 80s was the big explosion in marketing where and it probably still goes back to Star Wars. Just they went that much deeper it was because of Star Wars that they realized, wow, like our market really should be towards teenagers and kids.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why in the 80s we got a whole ton of these teen movies. But then we also got a whole ton of these kid movies. And I think they were like, well, rather than making a Star Wars thing, let's literally make a movie about kids for kids. And so we started getting, and Spielberg was really famous for whether he was directing them or just producing these movies that were very kid based. And it's no surprise that I loved Monster Squad because the guys who wrote it basically said that their idea of what they were trying to make was they grew up with the Little Rascals and the Universal Monsters, and they were like, that's what this is. It's what if the Little Rascals encountered the Universal Monsters? So I'm like, oh, two things I love put together.
Yeah.
Now, other than that, they're not like these Little Rascals are brought into an 80s sensibility.
Yeah, which is actually much more appealing for me anyway, I think. I mean, I like more.
And I find it a much better movie than The Goonies, personally. Maybe that's because I like monsters more than pirates. But
I don't know if I would say that it's better. I'd have to think about that for a minute. But
the reason there's just a lot of parts in the Goonies that I just find really annoying, especially in like the later half. There's just a lot of parts where it's just kids yelling over each other and like just in a weird way kind of being kids, I guess. But the thing that I love about Monster Squad is it's almost not even a kid's movie as much as it's a movie that focuses on kids, but it's almost an adult movie. Like it could almost have been a real horror movie, except for the fact that I think they knew that adults at that time weren't really going to take seriously a movie with the classic monsters. So they were smart to make it for kids. But when you look at like everything in like the family dynamics, especially any scenes that it's just with the adults, like the dad and all the side stories, the dad being a cop, if you were to watch those sequences out of context, you would think you're actually watching a cop movie.
yeah, I could kind of see that. But then you also have like some very kid movie elements, like the whole thing with Frankenstein kind of being befriended by the daughter.
That's definitely that's the sentimental part for sure in the movie. And but even then, I still think it's probably done better than the really. Like, I don't know. I think I might take Frankenstein over Sloth.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Oh, okay. Interesting.
It
is very similar dynamic for sure.
Like, because to me, Goonies feels like a real, like, it's a kid's movie, while I feel like Monster Squad they were consciously like, parents are going to take their kids to this, but let's also give something for the parents to also enjoy. Like there's heavy stuff with like the mom, like the main boy and his like parents they're not divorced, but they're clearly going through some marital problems. And there's just a lot. By the way, the mom the mom from Monster Squad is also the mom from Goonies. That's the one legitimate connection.
Oh, okay,
she's also the wife of Robert Zemeckis, the filmmaker.
Oh, interesting.
So she pops up in a lot of things, I find.
Wait, so Robert Zemeckis directed Goonies?
No, he didn't do either of those movies. Just for whatever reason, she's the mom in both of those movies.
She was. I was like, I didn't think that he directed.
No,
it was,
Richard Donner did the Goonies.
Donner, yeah.
And then Fred Decker, who's not really known for too many things. I mean, I would say Monster Squad is my favorite movie of his, but yeah, so he did probably Shane Black, the writer's more well known than Fred Decker.
Right.
But also, if you're a fan, did you ever see the movie Manhunter? It's like the original Hannibal Lecter movie from the 80s.
No.
Oh. Okay. Well, I guess it doesn't matter. But Frankenstein plays the Tooth Fairy in the original Manhunter.
Oh,
he was known
Fairy.
for playing a lot of creepy roles because he's like a big guy.
Yeah.
But well, we should talk about maybe about like the one thing I love about Monster Squad also though is like the actual design of the monsters, like the Stan Winston.
Yeah. I thought the werewolf in that was quite good. I don't know about his face, because when I look at his face, I'm kind of like, that's a bit of a weird face. But I love like when you see the wide shots of him, kind of with this like large upper body.
As a kid, he was the most terrifying to me. Was the Wolfman. He does kind of suffer from like the early Batman things, where he can't move his
stiff.
neck.
Yeah,
it's
right,
all there.
right.
But as I've actually gotten old,
in a lot of ways, that kind of contributes to his movement being giving it a certain look, especially because you're often sort of seeing him not quite as a silhouette, but almost as kind of this wide angle backlit sort of perspective you're getting on him.
And even though he's not in the movie very much, but the creature from the Black Lagoon is also I think a very impressive
that was
design.
a great suit. I was really and I think it's like quite similar to the original.
In some ways, it's a little bit like. In some ways, it's almost maybe it's not as iconic as the original Gilman, but it's creepier. Like it's got teeth. Like it's got much more of a fish face. While the original Gilman's kind of got these like I don't know how else to describe it, but like kind of like these like cocksucking lips. Okay. It's just got this like it's a little bit goofy. Like I love the Gilman, but the one in the new movie, I'm like, that thing could be in a movie today and it would hold up. Like it almost has like the face of a piranha. Yeah. The Monster Squad Gilman. And they just kind of took it into a different direction. But I really, I'm like, I look at it and I'm like, that's flawless. And apparently it was actually while they were having problems working on the Predator design, and it was from things that they worked out on the creature that they then incorporated into Predator, that like same year or so. Cause they were like, oh, we solved the Predator problem with the creature design.
Yeah,
and then they evolved that into, Predator.
Stan Winston did the Predator stuff then too. Hey?
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow, he's got a good resume.
Mm-hmm.
What was I going to say? I'm kind of going back to the Goonies. I think one of the things the Goonies does really well, which I think it does better than what Monster Squad does, is it leads me gradually into that kind of fantasy. And what I mean by that is both movies are sort of established as, they're established in the real world. And Monster Squad kind of just starts throwing these monsters and these supernatural elements at you. Whereas the Goonies, it's like you're kind of, presented with this treasure map and all these interesting artifacts up in their attic. And then they go and they're trying to solve this mystery. And there's these crazy...
the Fratellis.
Yeah, the Fratellis there. They're
see, to me,
these weirdos who are like who are these weirdo criminals. But it's like it's not until you finally get through all these weird obstacles and stuff that you finally are revealed, oh, holy shit, this treasure and this pirate ship and all of it is actually real, And that's the thing that I really love about the Goonies is it takes you on that journey that you so often go on when you're a kid. Sort of when you're a kid and you're searching for something, or you're on a bit of a quest to find something interesting, and then there's actually a payoff, right? And that's the thing, is like it gradually leads up to that payoff, I think, in the Goonies, and it's very satisfying when you get there.
I feel Monster Squad totally sets up the same kind of. I mean, if anything, Monster Squad has higher stakes, right? Goonies is trying to like save its community, and then like they find like the jewels. While Monster Squad's more like, we need to destroy this, or we need to like protect this amulet, otherwise evil will reign over the world forever. I guess the thing is, I just find that it's funny because in many ways, I guess Goonies is a little bit more plausible in real life, and yet the way it's delivered is almost a little bit less realistic than Monster Squad, even though Monster Squad is dealing with more supernatural elements that are unrealistic. They kind of take it in a they play it out in a more serious way, while the Goonies decides to be very it feels very much like a movie. If that makes sense.
I don't know if I would really necessarily agree with that, but I don't know.
Little things just like, like the water slide moments, and just like they're fun moments, but they're moments that you're kind of like, yeah, this is a kid's movie. While Monster Squad, it's like you have to kick Wolfman in the balls just to save your own life. And I mean, again, like, yeah, there's certainly things you can say about Monster Squad that are not realistic and stuff like that. But to me, it just always seemed more badass. Like, it almost seemed like it could have almost had a different rating almost than the Goonies. And maybe that's just what I like about it, is it just seemed a little bit more... just a little bit more like badass, and almost like leaning almost towards an almost like teenage audience, while Goonies is clearly a kid's movie and for kids. Yeah,
maybe it's because like I watched it as a kid, and the movie kind of takes you on that adventure. It's like you can just keep reliving that as you watch it again and again, kind of keep reliving the experience you had watching it when you were a kid, versus just watching Monster Squad for the first time, the other day as a 34-year-old man. Maybe that's why I feel differently about it. But yeah, I don't know. Fuck you, Goonies is better.
Goonies never say die.
No, but I mean, like, I love both of them. I think they're both like super.
I will
solid
give you
movies
this. I think
enjoyable.
I will give you this. I think Goonies has the better fat kid. Like, I'll take Chunk over Fat Kid. I will give you that.
Yeah.
But why didn't they hire Chunk to be in Fat? Why wasn't Chunk hired to be in Monster Squad? Like he didn't do anything else. But he could have been like the fat kid of the 80s.
Like, we can't just reuse him. But I do feel like Goonies has more genuine laughs as well for me. I don't know. How do you feel about Monster Squad as being for its comedy and humor and stuff?
I find it... As an adult, I find it funnier because it's more serious, the jokes hit harder. While the only real stuff in the only stuff in Goonies that I still holds up comedic wise is when Chunk is being tortured by the Fratellis.
Oh, really? That's
like a great comedic moment. But other than that, it's just, the older I get, the more I kind of hate the Goonies in general as a movie. Yeah, it's a lot of just the obnoxiousness of, and again, it comes more towards the later half of the movie where there's just way more. It's like I'm watching a Robert Altman movie, but with fucking kids, where the dialogue's starting to overlap each other, and it's just a bunch of kids screaming, especially by the end of the movie. It's literally just kids just like, no! And you're just like, shut the fuck up. And I just want to slap them. Or I want to see Sloth just punch them into oblivion.
I still really love Corey Feldman's character in that, though. I mean, he just cracks me up every time. It's like he's this kind of like, snarky, but like smooth talking.
He's the wise ass. He's the wise ass in the group. Yeah.
And I love it. He's like always combing his hair, and he's just like, I don't know. He's witty, and he's he just cracks me up, man.
Yeah.
But I also like that there's the dynamic with like the older brother too, the Josh Brolin character. And you kind of get a little bit of that in Monster Squad, because there's like the older kid who's like the bike. That was quite funny. I love the part where he goes and confronts the bully and makes him like eat the chocolate bar.
Yeah. Like, okay, so just going back to like the tough kid in Monster Squad, like he's literally like staking teenage girls to death who have recently become vampires. Like, I can't picture Josh Brolin pulling out a gun and blasting the Fratellis away.
So that's what you mean in terms of it being more adult.
There's so many sequences, just like again, when he shoots the werewolf and the werewolf's just like, thank you, and he dies. Like, there's just a lot of moments in the movie that are very real. Where
that was the thing that I thought was really funny, is how that guy's like.
He's the uncle from Napoleon Dynamite, by the way. The werewolf.
He is. Oh, that's hilarious. Well, like the fact that he keeps on going into the police station, and he's like, "Arrest me,
lock me up." Yeah, no, that's what I mean. Is like there's like when it's not when there's no kids in the scenes, you're like, I'm watching an adult movie almost, like maybe like a cheesy adult movie, but this is like more adult than a lot of adult movies of that time, I thought. And there's just, again, it's almost like I feel the actors in the movie weren't told that they were in a kids movie as much as they were just sort of like, this is the scenario, and like everybody kind of plays it straight, and that's why I think it's sort of so effective. But I agree, yeah, there's some sort of goofy stuff with the Frankenstein. That's like the part where you actually are almost like, now I almost feel like I'm watching a big budget Disney monster movie. But you know, I guess there had to be the one good monster. Also, it's a kind of, it makes sense when you get really familiar with the old Frankenstein lore. That was kind of always Frankenstein always was this sort of sympathetic. He was a sympathetic, he was a sympathetic character. He even in the original Frankenstein movie, there's a famous scene where he's with a little girl, and so I think they were partly playing in on that. Like if there's one character that almost could go good, it's Frankenstein. Yeah. Even in the book, it's always been kind of stated that like Victor Frankenstein is really the villain, and the monster is the victim. Yeah. Okay. Gotcha. Well, that makes sense. Yeah. Did you want to bring up another title? Well, I did have I have a few others. I mean, I did. Some of your titles are my titles too. That's why I'm like. Yeah, I did. I don't know. Did you ever think of the movie Clue come to mind at all? You know, the one that has. Yeah, no, Tim Curry. I know the one. I didn't even consider it for my list. It's just one of those ones that always kind of passed by me, mainly because I probably didn't really watch that movie as a kid. Yeah, I didn't either, but I just like encountered it a number of years ago and was like, yeah, this like, why have I not watched this? It just seems like, you know, a little mystery film, kind of a dark, spooky mystery movie. Tim Curry, fucking love him. Yeah. So. I mean, there's another movie I have, but it's kind of more, see, like, we're also going to do, like, the horror comedy ones. I almost maybe would have put Clue on horror comedy, but it also works as family comedy. Yeah, there's another movie I have on my comedy list that is very much like Clue. Like, it's another one of those kind of, like, dinner party murder mystery movies. Yeah, I just love that as a concept. It's, like, kind of the intimate setting, and also, like, the very nice setting of a mansion, for starters, because I like that mansion-y vibe. Like a lot of the stuff it's got a great cast too. Yeah. And you probably played Clue as a kid, or did you ever play it? Right? Yeah. The Clue, the whole Clue concept is a lot of fun in that it's like this whodunit. You're trying to, that somebody amongst the party has done this, committed this crime, and it's the suspense and the tension of trying to figure out what the mystery is and who's done the deed, and the setting, the intimacy of the characters. I don't know. For me, it's just like a pretty easy sell. Yeah. But I always did like playing that game. I like the concept of the game, and I like. I was a big fan of the game too. It's a very, but I think the movie's very clever. Like just the script is very clever. Even like they kind of have the alternate endings, which kind of allows you to kind of have your cake and eat it too. In some ways, Tim Curry is very kind of underrated in the movie, because as the butler character, especially when it gets closer towards the end, when he's like reenacting the outcomes and stuff, like that just seemed like that would have been very difficult. Like that's something that would have really have taken some true, like a theatrical actor, like which Tim Curry, he's a movie actor, but he also has a lot of theatrical training, and I think that's kind of where that kind of stuff plays in, where you're kind of doing like these long takes with a lot of dialogue, but also a lot of physicality. And I'm sure that wasn't an easy thing to shoot when you're just rapidly just spitting out that kind of dialogue. But again, I think in many ways, as famous as he is, I think Tim Curry's actually a very underrated actor as far as the versatility that he had. Yeah. I mean, he does get a lot of credit too, but I just he's a real icon for sure. I just mean that I think he was the type of guy that could have done so much more than maybe the opportunities he was given. Like he occasionally would be given something like Darkness, but like a lot of the times they would kind of be like, well, let's give him Tim Curry kind of parts, like that, just kind of roles that we're used to seeing Tim Curry in. Yeah, more sort of villainy, cartoony, kind of comedic.
parts.
A lot of like villains, but in comedies, I
Yeah.
find, which again, he was really good
Lighthearted
at.
sort of villains.
Yeah.
Or, I mean, not necessarily lighthearted, but yeah, kind of comedic usually.
The kind of villain where a kid will know that he's the bad guy, but without being overly scared of him.
Well, like my introduction to Tim Curry was probably The Three Musketeers.
Oh, yeah.
Did you see that 90s movie?
I did much later though. Yeah.
Okay. And I love that movie and I love him in it. Like he's a great Cardinal Richelieu, but he's, he takes that role quite seriously and the role is depicted fairly seriously too.
I was almost wondering if you might have even been introduced to Tim Curry without even knowing about it, because I think a lot of young people were introduced to Tim Curry by his voice work.
Oh, could have been. Yeah.
For me, I think Legend was the first thing I saw, just because that was such an early movie in our household.
I didn't see that till much later.
But another movie, though, that maybe you did see him in, maybe even before Three Musketeers, that you maybe just didn't know it. Did you ever see Fern Gully?
I did, but I don't think I saw that till after.
Oh, okay. Because yeah, he's the villain in that. He's like Nexus or whatever. He's also in a few. I think he's the villain in a few Don Bluth cartoons. Pebble and the Penguin is the one I can think of, which isn't the best Don Bluth movie. But Tim Curry is a classic. He's just got a great villain voice. He should have been more villains in cartoons.
That's just it. Hey.
Yeah. Oh, actually, well, this actually brings. I'm glad you brought up Tim Curry, because here's a really obscure British TV movie that I don't know if a lot of people know about, but this was like a really big one in our house. We kind of we taped it on VHS, and so I always kind of know it as watching just half of this thing. So the first half of the movie I'm very unfamiliar with. But I would actually argue that this movie almost could have been an inspiration for even something like Harry Potter.
Which we should dive into after.
Yeah.
So go ahead. So
it's a movie from the mid 80s. It's called The Worst Witch. And it's about a witch academy of schoolgirls. And it's British, although the main girl is actually American. She's Fairuza Balk. Just probably a year after doing Return to Oz. She was Dorothy.
Oh, okay.
And it's funny because she later ended up doing The Craft. Like, she ended up being very known for doing a lot of witchy roles, but she did this movie called The Worst Witch, where she's trying really hard, but everything kind of goes wrong. Like, they do like broomstick flying and they get graded on it, and there's also kind of like bully girls who kind of sabotage her a lot. But the funny thing is that there's like this grand high witch who's played by Tim Curry, and all the girls have a crush on him, which is just creepy because I don't know, just like these like 11-year-old girls just pining after this like 40-year-old Tim Curry. But he does have a dance number, and it's incredibly cheesy. It's essentially just turns into a really like low budget music video, but I won't watch The Worst Witch every year, but it's like I gotta watch the Tim Curry music number every year. It's just ridiculous. The song lyrics are so ridiculous, and the music video is ridiculous. And I don't even know how I could do it justice without. Look it up on YouTube. If you're a fan of Tim Curry and you don't know about this movie, you need to see it.
This is The Worst Witch.
It's The Worst Witch. Yeah. Just type in Tim Curry Worst Witch. And I think later on, The Worst Witch actually then got a TV show, probably after the success of Harry Potter. They were like, oh, we'll adapt it, and it actually became like a British TV show.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, there's a lot of elements to it. You're like, this is very Harry Potter-ish. Yeah, except that it's an all-girls school. But I mean, other than that, it's like the earliest thing I can think of like a kind of like a witch academy.
Yeah. Well, and that's sort of like what Harry Potter, like, that was one of the things that with Harry Potter, I always kind of forget if they're witches or if they're warlocks. They're wizards.
Wizards.
It's wizard
Well, I guess
school.
the theme. It's like I guess I always thought it was like the girls are witches, the boys are wizards. Maybe is that a good way to look at it?
See, I've never read the books, actually. Did you read the books at all?
No, my sister read them all. Like, she was into it. Okay.
Yeah, like as I said earlier, I wasn't allowed to read that or watch those movies or whatever. And, it was fine. Like, growing up, I wasn't really that interested in it anyway. So I was just like, okay, whatever. I'm not allowed to do this thing. Big deal. But watching those movies afterward, again, it was kind of like I came around probably in my later teens or early 20s, just kind of realizing, hey, this stuff is really up my alley, and I'd probably quite enjoy this. I think that those are really excellent movies, and I say that too, not having read the books, but my understanding is that they're fairly decent and well-respected adaptations of the books, and people who like the books tend to like the movies quite a lot as well. And I do kind of classify them as suitable Halloween movies just because of the nature of the magic and, you know, maybe some of the horror elements and things like that, the mystery that's involved. And I mean, just all around very diverse, dynamic, solid movies that are so suitable for kids and adults alike, you know, and I think that's really what makes them last the test of time. They age really well and they appeal to a broad range of people, and they also are good like morality tales too.
Yeah, I was almost disappointed that if I was just like a little bit younger, I would have been a great age for. Well, I mean, I guess again, my sister was maybe the perfect age for it. Like she actually read, she was reading the books before the movies were even coming out. Like,
oh yeah, and I know. So that's I was actually probably about the perfect age for those. I remember it was probably around when the second book was coming out that they really started. You know, you really started hearing about them, and then everybody was reading them, and we read part of one. I don't know if it was must have been grade 6 or something. So I would have been about, it was like around when we were like 10, 11, 12, something like that. But as I recall, it was kind of like the books were coming out. I was like the same age as Harry Potter would have been as those books were coming out, right? So
well, that's the great thing, yeah. And I think that's why, again, so many kids, it was great for them, especially if they started it at the right age, because then it's like you evolve. It's like each year you kind of go through a year of school as they do. Although I think the wizard school, it's like a little bit longer than a normal like high school. Like they're kind of they're it's kind of like junior high and high school together, right? Because I think there's like 6 or 7 books. I was kind of like skeptical at the beginning because anything that was just so popular, I was just sort of like, oh, okay, it's probably just some mainstream thing.
That was kind of why I wasn't crazy into it as well. I was like, oh, that's what everybody's doing. Well, you know, that's not what I want to.
It's almost kind of ironic that your parents kept you away from them, because as from what I've been told is there's actually a lot of Christian values in the Harry Potter books.
Well, that's the irony, right? But it's kind of that whole thing where oftentimes people will just judge something for what it is on the surface, and they'll go, witchcraft. You know, don't let your kids read about that. And, you know, I remember there was like this TV evangelist type, or he was like a TV exorcist, Bob Larson. He was like, damn you, Bob Larson. He was the source of ruining all my childhood fun.
Fucking Bob Larson.
Let's
go as Bob Larson for Halloween this year.
That's a great idea. He was the guy who kind of, I think, set my parents a little bit off on a anti-Halloween crusade, and also like he had this big thing when Harry Potter came out that he was like, this is a gateway into witchcraft, and you know J.K. Rowling is a witch and she's trying to lure your children down this path of darkness, and this is like Satan like doing these things.
You know what I've always found hilarious about that kind of argument is that if you're essentially arguing about the powers of magic, then why the fuck are you not learning magic? Like, if literally these things truly exist.
Demonic, I mean.
Well, that's a whole other debate. Is, I mean, that would be the whole next argument. Is like, okay, first let's establish if this is real. Let's first establish if there are real magic spells you can do. And then if you can first establish that, then we can establish whether they're demonic or not. But let's first establish if there's even magic that can be accomplished, right?
Yeah. Well, it's sort of like the idea of maybe joining the dark side of the Force, right? It's like maybe if you're willing to join the dark side, then you can learn these abilities. And I think people legitimately believe this. Yeah. But it's like, but you sell your soul in the process, you know? And so it's like, do you want to, you know, learn magic but have to go into hell or something?
Well, but the great thing, at least about the Star Wars analogy, is that for the dark force, there's also the balance of the good force, you know?
Right, yeah.
So it's, you could make the argument between black magic and white magic, but for every power that a Sith Lord has, there's also powers that Jedis have. And so you'd have to use the logic of that. Okay, if there is dark magic and demonic magic, then you'd also have to have the conclusion that there's magic closer to the side of God.
Well, I think from the religious standpoint, the belief is kind of God has that power. It's not for human beings. It's for God. But
unless you're Jesus, then Jesus gets the pass. Because that's the thing is like
he's the Son of God.
Well, but that's the whole thing, right? It's you're allowed to be a zombie if you're Jesus, but take that element out of it, and you've got a creepy wizard who is doing a lot of magic who came back from the dead. And so again, I just sort of feel like, well, who's to say we aren't all the son of God? I mean, isn't that part of Christianity teaches, is that we are all like children of God? So it's kind of always like, I never understood why Jesus is allowed to do spells, but nobody else, because he's the son of God. And I'm just sort of like, there's just a logic to that doesn't make a lot of sense to me, because at the time, nobody would be in the presence of that, no one would be thinking, oh, well, Jesus, you're clearly the son of God. No, people would be freaking out and saying, you've got crazy powers. You're probably working with the devil. They wouldn't just jump to the conclusion that he's the son of God.
Well, I think that's why he was controversial as a figure, Yeah. Because, obviously there were people who wanted to, who called him a blasphemer and things like that.
Yeah.
But I think, coming from sort of the religious perspective, they have sort of their own logic about it. And I could try to explain that. Again, it's sort of, I think the idea is like, God has the power, humans don't have the power, but Satan will try to tempt people like, no, you should have. It's sort of like the tree of life, the temptation of the tree of knowledge, right? It's like, God doesn't want you to have all this knowledge, but if you just eat of the fruit of the tree of knowledge, then you can have the knowledge that God has. But it's not intended for people. And, so maybe that's kind of where their logic is in regards to magic and things like that as well. It's like, if a person dabbles in black magic and wants to, shake hands with the devil, then that's, the risk is that it'll lead you straight to hell, I suppose.
Yeah,
that's kind of how they think of it.
Well, it's weird with the temptation stuff, right? Because some people say like, well, the devil tempted, we're kind of really going off topic here, but let's say like, well, the devil, let's say even let's say Adam and Eve, right? The devil tempted Eve to eat the apple, but God also put the apple tree there, right? I mean, isn't that also not also sort of a temptation test, I mean, like God didn't have to, like, if God doesn't want Adam and Eve to be tempted by the fruit of knowledge, maybe don't put the tree that produces that fruit in accessibility to them.
Well, you had to tempt that bitch, man.
No, but that's but was it God or was it the devil, right? Because the devil's just kind of like, hey, check it out. But the devil didn't put the fruit there to begin with. He was just kind of acknowledging, like, hey, like he was just kind of like saying, like, hey, here's an idea, take a bite.
Well, maybe it wasn't. Yeah, I don't know. I would think about it before I'd give an answer.
Yeah.
I don't know. I could probably come up with a good response to that.
I'm just saying, like, if God yoinked the apple tree out of the garden, what would the devil wouldn't have anything to work with, right? The devil would be like, oh, look at those bananas, eh? Check out those bananas,
This conversation could get a whole lot deeper. There are things that I could say about that, but it would get a whole lot deeper, and it would be totally un-Halloween
I know, well,
theme movie related.
Let's look at some other movies. So I've got some stuff on my list, but these are also movies that...
Tune in for our philosophy podcast, the spin-off of Philosophy with the Mooks.
That'll be like on Halloween night, our podcast will just be like, no movies, it's just heaven and hell talk.
Yeah. That'd be fun.
So, I mean, some of these movies, like, again, so here's one. This is another one that I'm pretty sure you haven't seen. I think I briefly talked about it the other day, but... it's definitely, this is definitely like a kid's monster kind of movie or deals with monster elements. And I think this was probably very much inspired by Beetlejuice. It came out just like a year or so after Beetlejuice. And they were like, oh, maybe let's try to do something kind of in the elements of Beetlejuice, but more for kids. And it's a movie called Little Monsters. And it's...
I've heard of this movie.
It's very much like the live. It's
Maybe
like the.
you've talked
It's like
about
I briefly talked about it on some of our other podcast shows, and it's kind of like the original live action version of Monsters Inc.
Oh, okay.
Basically, this kid, he starts finding like stuff in his house, like it's like he's almost getting blamed for doing these weird like pranks or these like these things that are kind of messing
Fred
up.
Savage?
Yeah, and Howie Mandel is like the monster, who I didn't even know was Howie Mandel for so long, because he's unrecognizable, and he's Howie Mandel is like his craziest, but he's essentially what I would describe as sort of like the Beetlejuice like character in this thing.
Okay.
And so he kind of keeps.
It was written by Terry Rossio and Ted Elliott.
I don't know who those names are, but did they do some other good stuff?
Yeah, well, they wrote like the Pirates of the Caribbean movies and
oh no shit,
Batman Forever. Mask of Zorro.
Wow, they're all over the place.
They're quite a dynamic group. They wrote Shrek.
Wow. So I wonder if Little Monsters might have been one of their first things, maybe. That's like late 80s.
No, they became like quite a hot writing team in that kind of era, 90s, early 2000s and stuff.
Yeah.
I don't know what.
Well, honestly, it's not a bad movie. In fact, if anything, there's something about the movie that's actually a little bit genuinely creepy. Like, it's one of those movies where it's meant to be a movie that kids can handle, and yet there's even some moments where you're almost like, oh, they almost went a little bit over the line at a few parts.
Okay.
Because eventually what happens is Fred, he kind of captures this monster that's been crawling out from under his bed. Yeah. And messing up his stuff. And then what Fred Savage discovers is that every kid kind of has a monster that comes out of their bed at night and messes with them.
Okay.
And so
I just want to say quickly, that is the first movie that they have as a writing credit.
Okay.
And then they wrote Aladdin.
Wow.
They wrote like The Return of Jafar and
these are these are big movies.
I know. They wrote the 90s Godzilla movie.
Okay, well, there's a bit of a miss. But it's still a big movie, though.
I don't hate that movie as much as a lot of people do. But anyway, 90s Godzilla, they did The Mask of Zorro, they did Small Soldiers.
I weirdly was almost, I don't know why, when you were saying that they did stuff, I was like, did they do Small Soldiers?
Yeah.
Because that one almost...
That's one of those kids' movies that you kind of like forget came out, you know? But I remember loving it at the time. They did The Road to El Dorado as well, and then Shrek and the Shrek sequels, Treasure Planet. I just wanted to list off a few
definitely
of these.
like they're big on like the kid movies, but what it's nice is like they're very it's not like a consistent, like they're very good at writing very different types of characters, you know? Like the fact that they, you know, like made all of these things, then also invented Jack Sparrow and stuff.
Right,
It's great. Well, anyways, I don't know what you'll think of Little Monsters. It's a real movie of its time. Like it is a very 80s movie. But
89 it says.
Yeah.
So it was late 80s, but
it
still,
was, It's but it's got it's so eventually the kid starts being brought under his bed, where temporarily you can actually like go through the floor under your bed and you're then in the monster world.
Yeah, that's a fun concept. Like even just hearing about it, I'm like, damn, I want to watch that.
And I don't know. Well, I don't know if you ever watched Wonder Years as a kid. This was definitely a thing I watched more as a kid.
That was a series, right?
It was a series about a kid in the 60s and 70s just going through high school, more or less, like a coming of age show.
Sounds fun.
And Fred Savage was the star, but it was narrated by Daniel Stern, who was supposed to be the adult version of Fred Savage.
Oh, okay.
And in Little Monsters, Fred Savage's dad is Daniel Stern. So I don't know if I don't know if they did that on purpose. Daniel Stern's also the dad in Frankenweenie, because I know you were watching that earlier today, so I had to just say, that's Daniel Stern. He's from Home Alone.
I was gonna say, holy shit, that was him in Frankenweenie.
That's the dad. Yeah.
Wow, I didn't recognize him at all.
I know, he's a lot younger looking in it and stuff.
Crap.
Yeah, but well, wait, have we touched on Frankenweenie tonight? Because you watched that earlier today. Did we actually talk about Frankenweenie? Because maybe now is the time.
We talked about it yesterday.
Oh, well, we talked about the animated Frankenweenie, but today we could talk about the live action one.
Yeah, for sure. Well, what's interesting is I had no idea that the original Frankenweenie was a live action movie. I was of the understanding that it was a short stop motion movie, which was more similar to the one that came out in 2012 or whatever. or I don't know. That
I think it was
more recent one.
I think it was around that time. Yeah.
But anyway, so that was a bit of a surprise. But I was quite enjoying watching it as a live action movie. I was like, the way they kind of did the dog, and I mean, quite a well directed movie. I can definitely see Tim Burton showing his chops.
Definitely. Yeah. No, you definitely see the early talent.
Yeah, like when he's got all that, when he rigs up the whole machine to electrify his dog and stuff. It was like, you're definitely seeing early Tim Burton style and flair.
Yeah. No, to me it had. I actually don't even mind the music. It's just sometimes it's a bit off-putting to not hear Danny Elfman in a Tim Burton movie, but it's still like good. The music is almost a little bit closer to almost like a Steven Spielberg kind of feel than maybe what would have been a zanier or Danny Elfman kind of track. But like it's got some great like set pieces, like the cemetery stuff looks probably the most Tim Burton of everything.
Great. Yeah, and there was some really iconic shots in there too.
Yeah,
like when he is like finally going to dig up the dog and he goes and climbs up onto the hill. Mm-hmm. You're just like, wow, for a guy's little half-hour short film, this is really it's memorable and it's visually striking.
Yeah,
and yeah.
And it's
the way that they did, the way that they shot the scene of the dog getting run over by the car, and just kind of a short little sequence of shots where it's like they kind of set up this idea that okay, he's throwing the ball into the road and the dog's running after it, something's gonna happen, he's gonna get hit, and then you get like this POV shot of him running in, and then pans over and you see the car, and then it cuts, there's just like this short little sequence of very simple shots just to imply, man, the dog got hit by a car and he's dead.
No, I feel like it's aged very well. Like it's almost like a timeless movie because it's already kind of playing on an old timey era. And I like the school teacher in the movie is Paul Bartel, who is also an actor / filmmaker in his own right. He passed away a while ago, but he was
he's a bit of an older guy in that.
The bald guy with the beard. Yeah, he made a lot of cult. He directed the original Death Race 2000, which is a personal favorite of mine, and he did some other movies in the 80s. You might probably remember him as the principal in Rock and Roll High School, I think.
Shit.
Yeah,
he was a younger man in
the
that.
The little paper airplane hits him in the ear, I think, and he's in a lot of those. He's just in a lot of the campy kind of old 70s 80s movies. Yeah.
Well, it's amazing how many sort of I don't know if cameos is just appearances that are in that movie, because of course the kid. As soon as I saw him, I was like, "That's the kid from Neverending Story."
Yeah, and it's right around the same time as Neverending Story, so he's barely changed.
Well, he got some high-profile people, right? Because he got Shelley Duvall.
Shelley Duvall's
which would have been this would have been like after The Shining.
That's right. Yeah.
So she would had that credit under her belt,
and she was known for stuff before The Shining too. It's just The Shining was the big one, but she was probably the most established actress of everybody in that movie. And then Daniel Stern was just starting to arrive with his career. He had done a few little movies, but it's kind of an interesting choice that they had grabbed him for Frankenweenie. Yeah. And Sofia Coppola is the girl who, in her own right, well, obviously part of the big Coppola dynasty, and then became a successful filmmaker in her own right. Yeah, even just like there's like the kind of the fat elderly like neighbor woman who's got her own little duck who looks like exactly just like a Tim Burton caricature sketch, you know. And
I can totally picture her like
the rounded like glasses
she
frames
is
and stuff.
The fat mom in Corpse Bride.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, no, our listeners probably are more familiar with the animated one, but you can easily watch the original one online, and it's good quality. And
it's worth watching.
Yeah,
totally check it out. I was impressed by it. It was not like a cheaped out kind of short film, you know?
Yeah.
When you look at a lot of these filmmakers' early feature films, let's say, if it's like say Scorsese's Who's That Knocking at My Door?
Yeah.
Or
Boxcar Bertha.
Let's say, no, I was thinking,
another filmmaker.
like maybe like Christopher Nolan's Following or something like that.
Yeah.
Those movies, like, they feel fairly indie, and that it's like, okay, they're kind of working with elements that they had.
Yeah.
But Tim Burton's Frankenweenie feels very Hollywood, you know?
Yeah, well, I guess that's the bliss of having a Walt Disney studio backing you up, because although it was a short, it was a Walt Disney production, so he had a decent, he probably had a very professional crew working with him, and then the nice thing about just if you're a very visual filmmaker, maybe sometimes your story structure might not always be the best, but you're always going to have a very beautiful visual look if you are sort of like an artist already, which is what Tim Burton was. So he was that much more aware of that, you know, just framing and style, which is why I think Frankenweenie and so many of his movies just look the way they do, because that is really, I think that's a big part of what he's bringing himself to the projects, is getting that visual style, which again, you watch Frankenweenie now and you're like, oh, that's so, like, yeah, there's such classic Tim Burton-ness there, but you have to imagine at the time there was no Tim Burton style, right?
Yeah, exactly.
There was nothing to compare it to, so it was just a very original thing that hadn't even been coined. Like, Burton-esque was not yet a term, right?
Yeah.
And as much as
hard to imagine nowadays because we're so...
Well, his own style, he's almost parodied his own style now, unfortunately. You know, it's like they've marketed it to the point that he's like, I don't have to even really, like, do anything more original, but just, black and white stripes. Hell yeah, do it, you know? and that's
a bit of a cynical attitude.
Well,
I think he's still doing
I think the biggest thing that kind of robbed us of Tim Burton's magic was CGI in a lot of ways.
Well, yeah, I mean what was his most recent thing that he did? Like, he did Dumbo, and then he did I guess Wednesday. Wednesday was probably. I guess
Wednesday would be the most recent thing.
Now, I didn't watch that show actually, but to me it seemed like very authentic Tim Burton in his element, like. And it's a television match made in heaven.
It's his only television thing, as far as I'm aware. So you also can't, even if it wasn't up to snuff, like, you'd got to cut him a break because it's not a movie, right? I couldn't judge it from its movies.
That show probably got as much resources thrown at it as a feature film would have.
Did you watch I haven't seen any of it. Did you watch some of the episodes?
I've kind of just popped in, like, my brother was watching it, and so I kind of just dropped in to watch, like, a few scenes here and there.
Yeah.
I didn't follow the story or anything, but the production value was definitely there. The style was definitely there. Well, I think I'll probably like it when I do watch it.
It's interesting because I guess his next movie that he'll be coming out with will be Beetlejuice 2.
Oh, yeah.
And so it'll be funny to see. Like, that'll be like a real testament to being like, can you come back to true form? Like, because it'll be very much compared to the original.
Man,
and
I have no faith in these. I have zero faith in these reboots. Like, I just feel like they're pretty much always bad. Like, the only successful one lately that I can think of was doing the reboot of
Mad Max.
Karate Kid. Okay. And Cobra Kai. Cobra Kai is a great show, but they did a really, really good job of that.
Well, on
paper, it sounds like a stupid idea. They spun it,
right? Like, they spun it to make it about John. The Karate Kid isn't named Johnny, is it?
No,
it's the other guy. The other guy's Johnny.
So Karate Kid is Danny LaRusso,
right?
And then the kind of the bully kid is Johnny. What's his name? Johnny Lawrence.
Okay,
that's right. It's funny because that's my, like, best friend's name.
Okay,
John Lawrence. So Johnny Lawrence is kind of like the villain in Karate Kid. Danny LaRusso is the Karate Kid.
Yeah.
But anyway, just my only point was just to say that was a good adaptation of this, a good reboot and an adaptation of this early thing. But, you know, you see, like, the Dumb and Dumber reboot or the Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure reboot. There's countless others that I could probably mention. They all fucking suck.
Well, it can't just
be trying to read.
It can't just be a cash grab or we need to make this movie, therefore, like, come up with the concept. It's almost more like you came up with a really good concept that earned the right to make it into a new movie. And
I don't trust that Beetlejuice is going to be any good.
Well, I'm curious. Like, I don't know who's writing it, you know, but if it was like some major passion project where the people really cared, and then they waited till something, because the thing was they've been trying to make this movie for decades. So I would like to believe that they finally got something worth making.
Yeah.
Otherwise, why wouldn't they have made some bullshit much earlier?
I guess that was the case with Top Gun Maverick too, right? Like they were trying to make that for a long time, and it was kind of like, it's just not like very good.
Yeah.
And then what they delivered was a pretty darn worthy follow up.
And I think you got to give full credit to Tom Cruise for that, because if it wasn't for Tom Cruise's own power and clout, he was the one who was like, this needs to be a good movie.
Yeah, he was the linchpin that was like, either it's going to get made when Tom says it's going to get made, or it's.
And he's one of the few kind of people in Hollywood who has that power to do that. And what worries me is I don't know how many. Like, I don't know if we have a Tom Cruise on the Beetlejuice movie. Who has that sort of clout.
Well, and Tom, I think, has good taste, and he's genuinely a huge movie buff too. Yeah, he is, and he wants his movies to be good. Like he wants to leave. He clearly is a guy who wants to leave a legacy behind. Yeah, and he doesn't want to fuck it up. He doesn't want it like any stains on his record. He's already like, kind of like this elderly actor now. Like I hate to say it, like people maybe don't think about it because he's just doing in some ways the craziest action movies of his career. Well, the funny thing is, like now he is, I think, as old or maybe older than Thomas Newman. Thomas Newman. Who's that? Paul Newman. Oh, okay. I was really trying to figure out who you were talking about. He's like as old as Paul Newman was in The Color of Money, I think. He might even be a little bit older. Because I think Paul Newman was doesn't surprise. In fact, 50s or something. I wouldn't be surprised if Paul Newman was younger than Tom Cruise is now. Yeah. Kind of crazy when you think about it like that. They need to do another Hustler movie where they should. I don't know. Timothy Chalamet is the new pool maverick. There's got to be somebody better. Maybe wasn't it Rooster? Get the Rooster from Top Gun. That guy's not bad. He's a little bit old. Maybe he's a bit old now. Yeah, you need like a kind of a young, like a young man. Yeah, he's in his 30s. But whatever that guy, Miles Teller. Right. Yeah. By the way, The Hustler. The Hustler's a great movie. I know. I still have to watch the original Hustler. But just going back to Halloween movies, I just want to make sure we don't forget anything here. Yeah. Nice though. It is nice that we're really going through. We're going through a fair bit here, and again, like there shouldn't. We're at 2 hours and 16 minutes, by the way. So. Oh, okay. Maybe we should. Well, okay. While I'm looking, do you have some movies on your list to jump into still? I had The Haunted Mansion. I kind of felt like the Harry Potter deserved a little bit more time, but I don't know how much more I have to say about it. Maybe we'll do a whole episode on Harry Potter at some point. But yeah, I bet Harry Potter fans would love that. Yeah, I've only seen about half the movies. I don't know about you. How many Harry Potters have you seen? Oh, I've seen all of them. Okay. I've seen all of them multiple times. Like I've kind of done a couple different marathons of them. Yeah, I think they're great. I really love them. I kind of like the earlier ones because again, those earlier ones are kind of that playful, childish, lightheartedness. Obviously, those are the ones I've seen. I've also been told the Chris Columbus movies, and I think I'm a fan of Chris Columbus. I love that John Williams was composing. Yeah. Although the other ones have got great music as well. That other composers. I hear a lot of love for, and it might even be my favorite. I know a lot of people who are big fans of Prisoner of Azkaban. If that's how you say it, just because it's a little bit darker in the series. Well, that's the thing is they kind of do get, I would say, a little darker as you go along. Yeah. And I don't know, they're all different, right? So I don't. It's really hard for me to say what I like the most. Yeah, but. I wouldn't mind just, now that the whole thing is done and there's been quite some time, it's now easier for me to kind of go back and marathon them. I was always kind of told that the first half, like the first 4 movies, were kind of made for everybody, while the last 3 or 4 were almost more for true Harry Potter fans, essentially. I don't know if that resonates with you much. That might be true. Like, I don't know, because I'm not I wouldn't consider myself a true Harry Potter fan in the sense that I haven't read the books. I didn't really grow up reading them or whatever. Yeah. But yeah, I could kind of see that being the case. My brother, both my brothers actually prefer the later ones. I think we do sort of agree that maybe we like the Half-Blood Prince the most. Was that number 6? Yeah, I think it's pretty sure it's number 6.
Okay, yeah. My last one was basically Goblet of Fire.
Okay.
That's where I kind of stand. And I actually really liked, I remember actually I think maybe at the time, Goblet of Fire might have even been my favorite of the 4 that I had seen.
Okay.
And I don't know why I didn't really, I think the only reason I didn't continue was because I was like, unless I'm going to just commit to the whole thing, I shouldn't maybe bother. So now I would go back and just commit and just be like, well, yeah, there really only is these movies. I mean, I could probably even just jump right onto movie number 5. I don't think I'd have to even go back to the beginning.
Well, it's worth it to marathon them, I think. It's just a good experience.
Just to refresh yourself, right?
It's nice, like, when you get to the end of them, you're sort of like, damn, they're over.
Yeah.
And then you want to watch them again because you're like, I want to go on that journey
I do remember, especially like the first movie or two, the CGI was a little bit cringy. Like I was kind of like, really, this is Harry Potter? They couldn't... Because again, it was coming out the same time as the Lord of the Rings movies were, and I was just sort of like, oh wow, you really see the difference in budget or at least quality from Harry Potter CGI. I'm mainly thinking of like there's like that troll in the first movie is almost looks like Shrek
and stuff. Yeah,
the dogs. There was like the snake stuff, and it's just like
they get better definitely as
I would imagine. Yeah. I just like the look. I like just like the look of the school. Like it's the idea of like pretending. What if I was in this school?
I think that's every kid's fantasy, man. Everybody wants to go to that school. What a dream.
Well, I almost feel, and I'm sure we're gonna get this down the road, but don't you almost feel that Harry Potter almost would have worked better as? Well, part of me almost feels that we almost should have gotten like a lower budget BBC production before we got the big American Hollywood movies.
That's not what I think. But what I often think is I think that they should have an animated version.
That would be great too. But also, what do you think about the idea of it being like a TV series where it really is like, you're really seeing like this high school, like this wizard high school where you're going through a full semester every year. And from what I heard is like,
that would be such a popular show.
It'd also be a way to really expect like to play out the books much more properly, because I think every book is a school year, and you could just play it out slowly.
Well, they could do that as the animated series.
Sure.
Fuck, they should totally be doing that.
Yeah. Well, hell, if it's animated, you could even bring back the original cast to even voice it if you do it animated, which is always neat.
Yeah, if you wanted to.
But
I don't know, it might be a little bit weird for their child voices, but.
Yeah. I don't know. Maybe they'll do little things, tweaking the pitch, or they'll just have to try and up their inner child for it. I don't know. The only other movie
Daniel Radcliffe can just squeeze his balls for the first few episodes,
hello.
or the first few seasons.
Like I'm older than Harry Potter. How does this sound? Hello. I'm Harry Potter. What? A wizard? I can't be a wizard. I mean, come on. Does that not sound like a 12-year-old boy? I mean,
no.
Well, I think just
maybe
I just hang out with a lot more 12-year-old boys than you do. I think.
Well, I'm sure you hang out with a lot of them.
So okay, another one I wanted to just drop because I think we're almost done with this this show and topic. But I also wanted to bring back a show that I had talked about briefly on one of our other shows, which is The Hilarious House of Frightenstein, because this was again one of my earliest introductions to monsters, and it was a weird little Ontario Canadian show that had, I think, just one season, and it aired in the early 70s, and everything after that was just reruns. But I think every episode might be on YouTube. Like it's essentially become like a public domain show at this point. But it was really neat. It was basically one actor who played every character other than Vincent Price, who showed up for 2 days of filming, where he just did they filmed him doing a bunch of poems, and they would insert him in every episode. But it was really this other guy who was playing every role. And they, like, it was like different kind of shows. Like he would dress up as the witch, and it would be like a cooking show. He would dress up as this. I'm trying to think of some of them were a little bit racist. Looking back, like they weren't the most politically correct for today. Just because again he was playing different like nationalities and stuff like that. But I don't know. To me, it's like there's so few iconic Canadian shows. And I feel that this is one of them, but it's also one of those shows that's really, I think, being lost in the future generations. This is more something I would bond with Canadian Gen Xers. And I don't know. Yeah. Have you ever heard of this show? Or
what was it called again?
The Hilarious House of Frightenstein.
I have not heard of it or seen it.
The most iconic character was probably a Dracula character where he had like green skin. He was like a green-skinned a green-skinned Dracula. And I think I talked about this briefly on one of the other shows. Like he would also for the Wolfman, he was Wolfman Jack, where he would be done up in Wolfman makeup, but his character and voice would be the Wolfman Jack, and he would throw on like 60s and 70s rock and roll music, and it would start becoming very psychedelic.
Sounds like a cool guy.
Well, it was a really cool show for a kids show. Like it was one of those things where it was one of those shows where I just felt like they got away with a lot of things, and they didn't think like, is this even appropriate for kids? They were like, screw it, let's just do it anyways. I also get the feeling that this was a show that a lot of older teenagers and college kids got stoned to and watched. So there's a certain number of these kind of children's programs that had these like two different audiences, like the kids, and then these like stoner teenagers who kind of got a completely different other experience out of the show.
Yeah.
And but it's if you're a Canadian listening to this and you're really into, you know, Canadian culture and some of the older stuff that used to be out there, check out this show. To me, it's kind of one of the classic Canadian TV shows of all time. But again, it's because I've been watching it since I was like 2 or 3 years old, where it was probably, even then it was reruns, but it was probably a more normal thing to air back then, as opposed to now, where it's now like a 50-year-old show, which is crazy to think of.
Yeah, wow, 50 years old.
Yeah.
That is nuts, hey?
Yeah. But yeah, I don't know, man. Other than that, I think every other thing on my list is more suited for our horror comedy show.
Sure. I'll just mention the fact that the Haunted Mansion exists.
Yeah.
And I watched it the other day. And I watched the Eddie Murphy film. And, you know, like, it wasn't bad. It was kind of, like, fun. It wasn't, like...
Did you watch it as a kid?
Movie, but no, I didn't.
Okay, because I was going to say...
I always just sort of loved... Like, I remember going to Disneyland and seeing the Haunted Mansion. And when I was there, it was open, but I wasn't allowed to go in. I think my mom wouldn't let me go in again.
I thought you said that weren't they like... it was like under construction, and you
maybe that's what it was, because I remember like
maybe that's what your mom told you.
The Pirates of the Caribbean thing was shut down at the time, so that was a disappointment. But then there was some reason I didn't get to go into the Haunted Mansion. I really wanted to, but yeah, I was always kind of drawn to this stuff. Again, I was like 8 years old when we were at Disneyland. Really wanted to go into the Haunted Mansion, but so when the movies came out, you know, I was always kind of drawn to it again for the same reason I think that I would like Clue and other similar type of stuff. But I just watched it for the first time, I don't know, a couple weeks ago maybe.
Okay.
And you know, it was all right. It was like not the shittiest kind of family movie. It was reasonably entertaining if you're looking for a good movie to show your kids. Like,
knowing what you know about me, do you think would I enjoy the Haunted Mansion if I gave it a chance?
You probably wouldn't really give much of a damn about it.
Right.
You'd
I mean, I do love,
okay.
I love ghosts. I love spooky stuff. Like if there's any kind of kid related thing that I could give a chance to, it would be something maybe like the Haunted Mansion, but maybe it's really cutesy. I don't know.
It's not so much that it's cute. It's just, it's all right. You know, it's okay. It's not like extraordinary. It's not like Monster Squad.
Right. Yeah.
And like I would totally freaking watch Monster Squad again and again.
Yeah. Did you see the Muppet Haunted Mansion also?
No, I'll probably like that one the most.
Yeah.
Because I know, so they just came out with a new Haunted Mansion movie this year. And I started watching that one, and it seems like it's again sort of all right for a 2023 movie. I don't know. I'm not overly excited about movies that come out mostly these days, but it's
fair enough.
You know, it wasn't horrible. It wasn't like,
I don't know about you. Maybe this isn't the right episode to even talk about this about, but I thought last year was there was an incredible amount of horror movies that came out. Like some of them were great, some of them weren't, but there was just a lot of them. And maybe some of that was a delay from the COVID pandemic that we got twice the amount. But comparing last year's to this year's, it seems like there's very little good horror movies compared to what I remembered coming out last October. Maybe that's just me, but I noticed there was quite a lot of pretty decent ones that came out last year, and maybe it kind of dried the well for this year. I can't, like, there's not even kind of one big horror movie that I'm kind of excited about for this October that, I don't know. Killers of the Flower Moon is almost, that's like the closest thing I'm excited for, and that's not a horror movie.
Yeah, not a
Where's
horror
the
movie at
horror
all.
movies for October this year?
Good
What's
question.
going on?
I haven't like checked out what's kind of come out in the last several weeks, to be honest. But you know, maybe that's what we'll have to do. We'll have to go and research for the sake of this podcast and go watch something that came out this year and do a review of it or something.
How are we doing for time? Should we
We should wrap things up.
Yeah.
I don't think we have too much more to talk about, but yeah, well, that was our little overview of family-friendly horror films, Halloween films, spooky stuff.
I think we got a lot of titles in there, to be honest. We said quite a lot, which is
wasn't
good.
bad.
Yeah.
Hopefully we brought up some good memories for you as a listener, and or maybe even brought some things to mind that you might want to check out. Like Monster Squad was totally new to me, and you'd recommended it, and I loved it. What a great gem that I'll keep on watching again and again.
Yeah.
And you have anything else to add right now?
Don't forget to watch Mr. Boogedy.
Yep. And on that note, I will wrap up with just saying, okay, Mom's Got a Date with a Vampire. Go watch that movie.
Yeah.
Watch it 50 times.
Grab the kids, huddle them all together.
You're going to love it, okay? Go
Yeah.
on to Disney Plus. Mom's Got a Date with a Vampire. You can sit down. It's a great watch. And I can't recommend that movie enough times to everybody. So on that note, let's call it a night. This is Kevin Rosmer signing off here.
And I'm Oliver Drawson.
Have a good night.